Well, my name is Yuya Assaaan-ANU, and I'm an educator, and I mainly deal with indigenous spiritual systems as well as indigenous culture. I have a very rooted and based initiation and understanding of West African spiritual systems, but I consider myself to be a Pan-African spiritualist, so I hold no system over another. I also study Kemetic tradition. I study some of the Ethiopian systems as well as the Sangoma and especially Congolese systems, which I'm in love with. So I try to, as much as possible, find the connecting dots and the connecting strings through various systems, not just on the continent, because we are a global people with a global understanding, but I try to find the connecting strings around the world, and I find that in doing that, you're able to create a more profound understanding of what your soul is, what your spirit is, what your body is, why you came out looking the way you did, sounding the way you did, so forth and so on. You get a larger breadth of information in the bigger picture. I'm currently, I teach, I'm the Jegna. Jegna means a guide or a counselor for an online educational spiritual center that I have by the name of Sadulu House. And there, I bring my students through various phases of initiations into information. So, when I say initiation, it's not just a ritual, but more so graduating them through their own understanding and through their own customized educational path of what they need as individuals to get to where they need to get to. So there's 3 phases that we do of that. And I'm also an author. I have a book on spirituality by the name of Grasping the Root of Divine Power. And that book is titled such because I really tried to create a work where people could read it and not necessarily be victim or servant to other what we call awos or spiritual leaders or spiritual guides, but have some sense of empowerment, spiritual empowerment for themselves. A lot of times when we come into higher level consciousness, awareness, and education, we immediately look to replicate what we had previously, which is if we came from a religious background, it's usually a master-slave relationship. So we're looking to replicate that, but at least now we're calling our master something by an African or indigenous name. So I wrote that book to try to begin to chip away at that sick paradigm of a person really giving up and disinvalidating their own power and teaching them how to grasp the root of where the source of power is. So, those are some of the things that I've been doing over the time. And underneath my banner of Anu Nation, which is, my parent, what we'll say collective, there's a lot of different sites and services and things that we provide under there. And we have books under Anu Publishing of different titles and imprints dealing with natural hair, family relationships, and more specifically the family dynamic that exists between cultural or what we'll say conscious people, and how to really navigate as conscious people proper family dynamics, and family dynamics when we're mated or have previously mated, we'll say, to someone who may not be interested in conscious information, and what happens when we have children with those type of individuals, and they want to sit in front of the TV all day, and they want them to align themselves with a culture and a society that we are vehemently opposed to, and how that sometimes creates this really schizophrenia inside of the children because they have these dual allegiances between parents. So I also have a book that I wrote on that, and I do lectures on that as well, on cross-cultural unions and what I call the suicidal family. So this between authoring and teaching, and I do spiritual readings for people and spiritual counseling and instruction. My day is pretty full, so that's pretty much me in a nutshell, I think.
Well, let me ask you a question. How did you? What got you into this? How did you this first come to your attention? What was it? Something innately inside of you that directed you this way, or what happened?
I would say it was kind of a series of divine coincidences, as I would call it. I didn't get hit by a car or get bit by a dog real hard or anything and had an epiphany. I never really had that like turnaround moment. Not to say that my entire life I've been trying to strive and live towards spiritual principle. I certainly haven't. But even in whatever I have done, whether it been debaucherous or whether it been righteous, there was always kind of a coming to terms and an acknowledgement of higher spiritual information. So I would say, my first at least introduction or feeling, that there was something greater than what I was seeing with my two flesh eyes really came through music. I come from a very musical family, and as a child I was kind of considered a musical prodigy. So because of that, I stayed very much connected to live instrumentation. I played bass and guitar and a few other instruments, and I could say really my first true experience where I felt like I was exposed to another realm or another dimension came at listening to Jimi Hendrix, and I remember listening to Machine Gun and just feeling like, as a child, I thought I was listening to a demon sing to me. And, I remember sharing that with some of the elders around me, and they said, oh, well, yeah, they said, well, Jimmy was just on drugs. So, that's all you heard was drugs. So that was their answer for me, but I knew it was something more. And that was kind of my introduction to channeling, and then I went on a search, like just as a child through music archives to try to find different songs that would take me there, quote unquote. So, I got heavy into Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I would listen to songs like Serpentine Fire, which we know is talking about the Kundalini. I got heavy into Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, and eventually, of course, you start the questions, and I got into Islam and 120, dealing with the Nation of Gods and Earths, and I was even in the Christian church for some time. I was a youth pastor, and each step led me closer and closer to figuring out what I was, and eventually led me to the Ifa tradition of Yoruba. And this may possibly be a step too. As I teach my students, never get stuck in anything. And even though I have high priest initiations in Ifa, it doesn't mean that this is where I've come to retire. A couple of years from now, I may just be looking at canyons and trying to figure out how to extract the spirits out of a canyon. So it's a journey, but music was very similar to the movie Inception, where they use music to wake, as they call it, the kick, to wake them up out of the dream state. Music was my kick. Music is what woke me up out of the dream state.
Now, do you think that Jimi Hendrix may have been in contact with some sort of otherworldly entity or something like that in his music? Do you think that's what it was?
Well, I'd say that Jimi Hendrix is the otherworldly entity. When you look at Jimi, all you see is basically a freak. You look at someone who does not look like they belong on the planet. I mean, you remove the music from him, remove the guitar. The fact that he played a guitar upside down. It wasn't just enough that he was left-handed, but he played a right-sided guitar on the left, so he played backwards. Okay, so we have that issue. And then we also have the issue of him setting guitars on fire. Many said that he got that from Pete Townsend of The Who, but that was incorrect. Pete Townsend got it from him. So he sets guitars on fire, then he would lick them and hump on them and make love to them. None of these things are human. These are not things that human beings do. So a lot of times when we look at certain people, and they just seem like otherworldly, is because they are otherworldly and they've not totally acclimated themselves to the planet. But the beauty of them not totally acclimating themselves to the planet is that they channel through messages from their home world. So I would say it wasn't just that he was in touch or channeling, he was that thing. He was that entity, he was that Orisha, he was that deity and an archetype that people are still striving to connect to and pray to.
Wow. That's interesting. Okay, well let me let me turn channels here real quick. And on Facebook, I'm always getting into discussions with different people about different topics, and I go into different rooms and everything. And inevitably, I always run into a sister who's a Christian, and they will say something like, "There aren't any brothers out here who love the Lord anymore." And that just gets under my skin when they say that. Because what do you say? You just totally, I think you totally ignore the spirituality, because I don't think there's any brothers out there who aren't spiritual. It's like, it's like, it's almost like every brother out there just walking around just serving the devil, just Satanists or something like that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, we're all out here striving to understand our spirituality. How would you respond to something like that? I know I asked you that last time on last show, and you gave a very good answer. Sure. And I would just, how would you respond to that?
Well, again, and I'm going to take it a little step further than what I did last time, but, my first initial statement was, before someone makes that statement to me, I need them to qualify the statement, and I need them to qualify their authority to even make the statement. So the first thing I'm going to want them to do is to define the word Lord, and to define the power relationship between someone who you call Lord and someone who is lorded over, and if that is something that humans need to be engaging in. So I need that answer first from that person before I start answering anything, because sometimes as people who have kind of climbed the ladder, not that we're better than other people, but people who've climbed the ladder of information, and we've put the work in, and those Friday nights when everybody was out doing the boogaloo, we're sitting at home watching 4-hour YouTube documentaries and writing down notes and things like that. Those of us who've sacrificed in order to learn something and know some things, we don't always have to get into these debates with people who are just, espousing rote statements and rhetoric that they've memorized. So the first thing I need to do is to make sure that person who I'm getting ready to engage with is on the level. And if they're not on the level, then I may give them a couple things to go look up or study if they want it before we even have a conversation. So that would be my first initial response before I even validate the person. And then after that, before coming to that place, we'd have to travel a little bit in our legacy, and we'd have to really ask the question, when indigenous people were encountered, melanated people, because we saying brothers, so melanated people anywhere on the planet, were they ever encountered without some form of mythology or without some form of acknowledgement of a deity or some type of spiritual power or spiritual rituals that they engaged in? And of course, the answer is no. I mean, that may be one of our problems. We're some of the most religious people on the planet. So when we start there, then we then have to ask, well, if we are in a place that no brothers love the quote-unquote Lord, whichever Lord it is that we're talking about, because we got landlords and, house lords and, lords of lust.
We got all kind of lords. Jesus! Which one? Jesus! There's no brothers out there who love Jesus.
Okay, beautiful. So no brothers out there who love Jesus. So first, again, I need to qualify who this Jesus is you're speaking about, because perhaps the Jesus that I love is not the Jesus that you're interpreting in your mind. Because a brother may say, well, look, I love Yahshua. And that same sister may say, but see, that's what I'm talking about, that foolishness. But that brother may, so that's where we kind of come into a problem. Or I might say, because I'll say I love the Christ. I love the Christ, definitely. I'm striving to be Christ, But Jesus, nah, I'm not. I don't know. You can have that, but Christ, definitely. And that could be problematic too. So it's kind of like I say again, defining of the terms. What exactly are we speaking about? And do you really mean that no brothers love Jesus, or you're finding less and less brothers who are cowtailing and really submitting themselves to the system that handed you Jesus? Because you have a lot of sisters or women who have taken on that charge of Willie Lynchism very strongly and very passionately. And whenever they see a man who's not invested in the system in whichever form, whether he has a 9-to-5 job, or he's got a driver's license, or he's proud to be an American citizen, or he's paying child support to the courts, when they don't see any of those things happen, they associate that with all the other institutions that govern that. So they go right to the Vatican, and then it trickles down, and they say, well, Jesus, you don't love Jesus, without really separating the concept and the ideology of this religious Jesus from the state. To them, it's really the same thing. If I show that I'm invested in all these things in the state, a woman won't even ask me if I'm a Christian. She'll just know. She'll just know I love Jesus because of the fact that I've invested in all these other things from the same people who gave us this perverted idea and concept of the Christ. So that conversation could go down many different rabbit holes, or that question. But first, I think it's important for the person to qualify the question, and then I need them to also explain to me, what is an expression of love? When you say they don't love Jesus, is it because they're not proclaiming it? Because when you're speaking about brothers and you're speaking about African culture and concept, African love is very silent. It's not loud. It's that ka energy, and ka means spirit, or it means breath, but it's that silent aspect, or that Amun Ra. Amun is the hidden aspect of the Most High. So we don't, you even read African mythology, you don't hear these proclamations of love every 5 minutes, because our people are traditionally not so insecure that we have this feeling of separation between the energy of love and ourselves, that we need other humans to tell us every 10 minutes that they love us. So are we concerned that brothers don't love the Lord or love Jesus, or are we concerned that brothers are not proclaiming their love, or are we misunderstanding when brothers are actually putting that love into action and making it a verb? So one may tell me I don't love Jesus, but putting my time and energy into the amount of study that I do and going as deep as I do to share this information with the people, and 75% of what I give people, and I'm sure the same thing with you, I can tell, 75% of what we do, we give away for free. We only probably charge about 25% of what we actually do. So is that not love? And we may not say I love Jesus, but is that not love? Is that not giving to the people? Is that not what Jesus did? Is that not even miraculous, considering the backgrounds that we grew up in? Considering that no great council of elders has yet to descend on the African community in America and guide all of us young brothers into self-awareness and higher realization. No great council has come and mated us off and paired us with each other. So that's why you have a lot of us out here as single. We have these broken families. So we've pretty much been hitting these walls and hitting these bumps by ourselves. And it's been a journey of self-validation. No one has really even come and said, you're on the right track, young man. Most people have said, you're going to keep messing around with that stuff and something going to jump on you. You're not going to be able to get it off you. We've heard things like that. Keep messing around with them black arts. So is that not love? That sacrifice? Is that not love for the mind of Jesus, for transforming our mind into the Christ? So again, it goes so deep, with that particular statement. And in most instances, I think we're seeing a reemerging of the self-aware and knowledgeable African man. We got a lot of Paul Robesons and Emoteps popping up again. So I would say that's love. That's love for Jesus. That's love for Christ. That's love for Yeshua.
That's what I was saying, that, is that we're just expressing our spirituality in a different way. And I think that a person who is narrow-minded in their thinking and not objective in their perceptions aren't able to see that. They just like, it's okay, you just need to be doing this right here, and if you're not, that's just it, and then when I speak to these people, these women, I find inevitably almost, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time that they don't even understand their own religious beliefs. It's just a belief system that they hold dear, but they haven't investigated it. They don't understand its origins. They don't understand its languages. They don't, they haven't read the book.
Right.
Or anything like that. Because if they did, then I think that they would be able to see the connections. Like you said earlier, you were seeking the connection in things. And I don't think they see that. But explain those connections, how, things are, connected.
Excellent segue, because of the fact that love is connection. So when we look at the idea of love, and again, we make that word more important than it probably should be, because it's, love, it has many different translations, and most people can't define it anyway. But they use, just like the word God, most people can't define it, but they use it anyway. But in the Yoruba tradition, we have an Orisha, or what we'll call an archetype, a cosmic energy or angelic energy, by the name of Oshun. Oshun, O-S-U-N. Sometimes you'll see it spelled O-S-H-U-N. Oshun. But Oshun represents the congregation of the universe. And when I say congregation, she's the congregative force. She's the force that pulls all things together and connects them. So on a lower level, or more animated version, Oshun is known as the goddess of love. But what that really means is, and they'll say, oh, she's about sex and lust and this and that. But what it really means from a more scientific and energetic perspective, she's the energy that binds things together. So she's that dark matter that scientists are still trying to figure out what the heck is this. Well, they know it's melanin. But this dark matter that keeps everything together, that constitutes 97% of everything in creation. So that's Oshun, or more conceptually what we would call love. So once you start understanding the love energy and how love energy binds everything together, because in order for us to complete this story, we're all living mythology. We could study mythology, which is awesome, but the more you get into the study of mythology, the more you're going to start seeing your own life path and journey mirrored in that mythology. And you might find a particular archetype. You might read about Hercules, and you could say, man, that sounds like me. Like everything he went through, with the murder of his family, having to complete those tasks, everything like that, feeling like he was part man, but also feeling like he was kind of special, like he's also part God. That sounds like me, and then you'll start realizing that we're living out not only astrological, cosmic, but ethereal events in our own life. And the more you attempt to connect the dots in your life, like I said, when you first asked, how did I come to just a series of divine coincidence? Because coincidence, the word means to coincide. And a lot of times we'll use coincidence mistakenly in replace of the word accident. So we say, oh, funny coincidence, I bumped into so-and-so. Well, if it's a coincidence, it was orchestrated and meant to happen. So one of the things that I like to study is the connections between why certain, we'll call them religions or spiritual systems, were introduced to certain regions and people at a certain time. And then you start to find the connective mythology of humanity. Like, this is what humanity is going through. For instance, when you take 120, or the Nation of Gods and Earths, there was a time period that was introduced to people in this country, to young men and women in this country, because there was something that we were going to need later on. And that something that we were going to need later on was not only hip hop, but we were also going to need to have greater control and mastery over the English language to the point that we could animate the English language. So when 120 came, what it began to do was to take certain words, and it even took numbers, and it gave it new value for us, because at that time we were seeing English as a very dead language. Especially those of us who, not so much at that time, but, now who reach back and try to learn the Hebrew or try to learn the Yoruba or the Kiswahili, so forth and so on. It now gave English life. So now later on, when we're doing our prayers or our chants or whatever, and we're using English, or we're using numbers, it actually gave it a greater numerical or vibrational value because of how it was twisted and mangled. So when somebody said zigzag zig, and it, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, it now gave us a different type of energy to that, or born, or to say I be, things like this, so those connective things, I try not to dismiss anything that comes, even our journey through the Christian church. My personal journey through the Christian church is what allowed me to see that there are things that should be studied. There's a scripture that says, study to show thyself approved. A workman need not be ashamed, but rightly dividing the truth of God, or the truth, or the word of God. So that right there, study to show thyself approved. That was a very important thing to me that carried me through different systems. You're supposed to study, and it says rightly dividing the word of truth. You're supposed to break it down and dissect it. So that was a connection right there. And that study, that connection, that scripture is what made me leave the Christian church years later. Because I studied so much that I figured out this is not where it's at for me. I've graduated. It's time to go somewhere else. So that desire to connect, like you asked, what are those connections about? All that is the desire to love. The desire is to express, to see how divine intention is expressed through many different things. Love is the intention of the divine. So sometimes the intention of the divine says, I got to send a tsunami, I got to send a hurricane, I got to send a volcano, or I got to make some money appear on the ground for this person, or make sure they find a love interest in their life, so on and so forth. It expresses itself through negative and positive polarities. That is love. That's the divine intention, and that divine intention connects us with all. It's with the all in all. And I don't mean to sound too poetic. I'm trying to keep it very logical, but that connects us with everything. That connects us with all, that divine intention. And once you start looking at different spiritual systems, you have to look at them like they're different ornaments on somebody's necklace. There's one necklace, or there's one belt or wrist or bracelet that you have, and each spiritual system throughout the world is supposed to be attached to that bracelet or to that necklace, because they give the full picture. You can better understand Jesus if you understand Haru. You could better understand Haru if you understand Thor. If you could better understand Thor if you understand Shango or Krishna or Buddha, and right on down the list. And they all give you the full story. Or Dionysus helps you to understand Obatala. So we have to start connecting things and stop being so afraid to see ourselves as global citizens or global residents, and more importantly, see ourselves as global spiritualists. Everything that's on the planet came from us. It came from the soul. Every spiritual system that has a root and core of truth, it came from you. So you need to look at them all like they're just one big giant menu, and you pick and choose what you want out of each of them, and don't look at it as an act of blasphemy, because you created them anyway. The Orisha and the angels are much younger than you. You create them. They're not as old as your soul. So that means you have dominion and power over them. So whatever systems that were created that worship them are systems that you yourself, as a self-actualized being, are actually older and higher than. So you're higher than religions, because religions were created in order for people to learn how to live like you, to civilize themselves up to the level that you had already obtained. That's why we have religions.
It's an interesting thing. I would always make this analogy to Christians. They would look at like the Roman or Greek pantheon and those religious systems and say, oh, this is, they were this was mythology or, something to that effect. And then I would just point out something to him. I said, okay, well, let's look at Christianity. You have a father whom you call God or Jehovah or Jah or whatever. And you have a son, called Jesus. And then you have angels. You have Michael, Uriel, Raphael, all these different things. What's different than in Rome? They have Zeus, and then Zeus had his son, and then he had, you have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. What's different? It's just names. You just change the names and everything, but it's the same exact thing.
Right. But people have a lot of trouble removing themselves from Jesus, because once Jesus is left out of the equation, and forget the fact that we're talking about the same archetype. Once the word Jesus, because remember, we're taught, there's little things that are taught to circumvent your argument before you even come into consciousness. There are people who know, let's give them songs like this. Let's give them this hymn. There's power in the name of Jesus. There's power, wonder-working power in the name of the Lord. There's power, wonder-working power in the name of Jesus. Okay, so now when you come and say, well, hey, man, it's just got different names, it's the same thing. But then they'll say, but do you understand the power in the name of Jesus? And then they'll say, in the name of Jesus, I cast you out. The devil's a liar. So they get stuck on this very low word vibration. And for many of us who understand the literary aspect of it, the letter J is actually a very new invention. So back then there was no J even. So is there really power in that name of Jesus? Or are you talking about some new power? Because back then that wasn't the power. They weren't calling themselves followers of Jesus. They were called followers of the way. So you're absolutely right that we're speaking about various forms of mythology, whether it be the Bible or any other holy book. They're just forms of mythology which give us a greater understanding of science. Mythology takes us to the place where science leaves off. But, people have a lot of times getting outside of that programming. And at some point, we have to take it back to the Bible, where it says, when you evangelize to people and they don't want to hear you, you shake the dust from your feet and you walk away. We have to understand that some people were placed on this planet to be that decoy energy so that we can get done what we need to get done. But our ego will cause us to engage in these extended discussions and arguments with them. And the truth is, at this point, we only need to be dealing with people who are hungry and who are thirsty. If they're hungry and thirsty for the information, they'll humble themselves to the information. But when you're speaking to someone who's puffed up with the arrogance of religion, there's nothing you can say to them. There's nothing at all you can say to them. If you even read the Bible, there's nothing that's really said to convince you to become what we'll call a Christian or a follower of the way. The only word that's given to unbelievers is only one word given to unbelievers, and that's to repent and accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. That's it. There's no advice on how to be a sinner but still be a good person in life, anything like that. It's either you come over here and you join this fraternity and you get this information, or you go to hell. That's it. But we're not gonna waste the entire book on trying to convince those who are not ready to repent. And repent just means to go back on your way of thinking. Repent means to think, and re means to go back, or re also comes from ra, which means divine light. So it's the divine light of thinking that causes you to reverse your way of thinking. Divine light. So if you're not ready to accept or see divine light, or you're too blind to see divine light, hey, we ain't really got nothing to say to you. The rest of the book is for the people who can see divine light. And we got to move the same way.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's shift gears once again. Last time, because we got some people who are slowly coming in, we were doing some readings and so forth that I found very, very interesting. That I know a lot of our audience
are going to be very, very interested in too. I'm sure it's why a lot of people tuned in today. Talk about that a little bit, about reading a person's spirit and the principles that are involved around that. I find that very interesting.
Okay. And I think maybe we got a love theme in the show today, because I got to go back to that again, which may help because we explained love a bit. But reading is a form of loving. Okay, doing a spiritual reading is a form of loving, and I'll explain, because as I explained last show, we have different levels of exchange and communication and cognition that we can engage in. So, for instance, if you were to walk into a room, there's communication and exchange that immediately happens because you are physically seeing the people in the room and they're physically seeing you. And then you may shake someone's hand, or you may give someone a hug. That's a physical exchange, and there's a form of conversation there, because you get to feel a person's energy, so forth, or just, their body tells you something. There's messages that are revealed through what we call physiognomy, or body language. And then you may speak to the person. That's a verbal communication. It's an exchange. So, I won't go through all of them, but so forth and so on. You go through various levels of cognition and communication, one of which is mental. And again, as I explained in the last show, melanated people, we're heavy with the telepathy. We're heavy with the mental latent communication. That's why we have words like mother effer. And if you say mother effer, it could mean 15 different things, depending on the context, depending on the energy that you put with it. It could mean something great, it could mean something horrible, it could mean that I can't find something, it could mean so many different things. I'm looking for someone, I just won something, this feels good, all mother effort could mean all those different things, aside from its root understanding of what it means, which we know takes us back to the plantation. But in any event, so there's like a latent communication that even happens mentally that you can share with each other when you're kind of shooting vibrations, or from that first eye, you're shooting messages to each other. This is where we get the technology of the cell phone. This is where this came from. It was a desire to connect in the same way that Africans did, via telepathy. Okay, so that's mental exchange. Then you have spiritual exchange. And this is prevalent when we look at women, especially women who are mothers. And a lot of times, their children may be away. They could be at college or whatever, and they'll just get a feeling in their spirit. They'll call their child and find out their child is getting ready to commit suicide or something like that. And not to say that men or as fathers are not sensitive to the spirits of our children, but we don't have that same pull, because women are the watery energy. And if you understand the science of the Vesica Pisces, which is also the symbol for Jesus, that the fish who live in that water, which are the children, they are always subject to the sway and the movement of the water. Okay, so the water can read the fish's emotions and activity, because emotions or energy in motion travel through the water. So a woman has that same connection with her children. Their emotions and their energy travel through her water in her body, even after birth, and 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. Their energy and their emotions still regulate or disrupt or affect the water inside of her body. That's a form of spiritual reading. That's a form of divination. Okay, because the spirit, now we're past the mental or the cerebral, we're into spirit now. The word spirit is the same source as the word spiral. And if anyone knows about plasma, or how energy moves through the universe, through space, or outer space, if you want to say that, we know that energy moves in the form of a spiral. It doesn't move like a straight line of you just rolling a ball or anything like that. Energy always works itself into a vortex when it begins to move. And scientists who study it, they always see this as a shape that it takes. So that's a spiral, or that's what we call spirit. Same place that we get the word inspire. To be inspired means to be in spirit. So even to be inspired is a form of spiritual reading. because you're now immersed in that spiritual energy. And once you're inspired, you can now connect to other people who are also inspired, and you can read each other. Now, beyond the spirit, we have another place, which is called the soul. Okay, and the soul is the place that is not necessarily the all in all, but is a portion of the all in all. And everyone has some people on the planet have a portion of the all in all, or what we learned about in the Bible, that breath of life, when God breathed into Adam and he became a living soul because of that breath of life, that wind, which we also call Emi, E-M-I, in the Yoruba tradition, or Brahma. Okay, it's that wind or that breath. Okay, so that portion of soul that some people have received, okay, people who are not just generated on the planet, but people who actually are generated in what we like to call heaven, or the fifth dimension, or higher up even beyond that, they have what's called a soul. And if you have a soul and I have a soul, if I know how to tap into my soul energy, and I know how to send my soul on missions, I can send my soul to go have a conversation with your soul. And that's how a reading is actually done. Now, there are some people who do false readings, and what they do is they're reading you at the physical level. This is one of the levels that I spoke about, like the handshake. So you'll come into their space, their shrine or whatever. They'll look at how you sit. They look at how you hold your pocketbook, how you look around, and they'll start reading you based on that. And you'll say, wow, that's right. But they're only reading your physiognomy. Okay? For a true, actual, effective reading that transcends time and space, you have to have a soul reading. Okay, and a soul reading only can happen with someone who, one, possesses a soul, and two, someone who has aligned their spirit with their soul. If they have a wayward spirit, they cannot give you an accurate reading. Okay, so if you go into someone's shrine and you know they're trying to steal your money, or you know they're trying to sleep with you, which is probably out of alignment with the soul intention, then the reading is only going to be at that level that they've achieved to. So it might be a reading that only deals with emotions. They won't be able to deal with your life purpose, which is what the seed of the soul contains, that information. Life purpose, your destiny, why you were born into the family that you were born in, why you were born in the region that you live in, why you look a certain way, so forth and so on. You can only have that with someone who is in alignment with their soul energy. Okay, and that's when the spirit and the soul are in step with one another. So that is, I know, a very long explanation, but I wanted to give that much information for those who may have gotten readings before and they were disappointed, from the person who read them, or who have a desire maybe to do readings themselves, to understand that this is how you make your readings accurate and appropriate every time, is because once you tap into the energy of your soul, you now have the resource of what we call Akasha, or the greater souls of the Ba. You have those resources available to you at that time. If you tap into your spiritual energy, your spirit only has the wisdom of the astral planes in this lifetime. If you tap into your mental energy, well, your brain is pretty much the lowest and smallest part of your entire being. So you can only tap into your active mind or your subconscious mind. So you really want to always be trying to tap into that soul and get the soul to ascend and get as powerful as it possibly can be.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let me see. I was sitting here trying to get all because I'm thinking, you know what's coming next. There's a lot of people out there who are really interested in those soul readings. You said something that caught my attention when you said if you don't have a soul. How do you identify someone who does not have a soul? If it's an individual who don't have a soul, how do they act? I mean, how do they, how do you know? And is that specific to race? Or gender, or what? How do we identify this?
Okay, excellent question. Well, first, and I think we covered it a little bit last time. I gave like a simple way, but I'll take it a little bit further this time. But I'll just cover that real quickly. From an emotional place, a real quick guide is warmth. You know, for instance, when we're dealing with melanated women, one thing that can always be noted, whether we like them or we don't like them, that there's always some form of like warmth that comes off a melanated woman, and maybe even some form of attraction and pull that we have towards them. Not necessarily a sexual or salacious thing, but we always feel a certain binding with them. And it could be, you know, someone at DMV, you know, at the you go in and renew your license, or it could be a bus driver or whatever, but you always feel a level of warmth that will come off. The absence or subtraction of that warmth reveals that you're dealing with a dispossessed body. You're dealing with someone who just possesses a spirit, a body, and a mind, and you don't have that what we'll call a lot of times warmth, because there's no connecting bind between you and them. The only thing that connects us together, now we know on an atomic level that all molecules are actually connected to one another, but on a spiritual level, the only thing that connects people to each other is a soul. If you don't have a soul, then you don't have that connection. Because again, let's look at the soul as or not even a soul, let's look at the greater aspect, or the greater container of what we call soul energy, or the Almighty. And it's really undefinable. But let's look at it if it was a gigantic lake or ocean, and it releases itself into small containers. And those small containers are supposed to go and maybe get new bacteria or new elements to bring back to the ocean, so that the ocean can be more perfected or better than what it was. So each one of those containers, now you can have an empty container that can still move around and looks like the other ones, or you can have another container that actually has that ocean water in it. So the ones that have the ocean water in it, when they come in contact with each other, they immediately will have a pull, an electromagnetic pull towards each other, because they're the same thing. So they're pulling towards each other because they're alike. The ones that are empty containers won't have that pull. You'll see that individual, be around that individual, but there's no immediate pull or attraction towards their energy, because you don't have the same parts inside. Okay, so now with that understanding, we ask now, well, you know, how does one identify it, taking it a step further? Well, the first thing to look at is, what are the fruits of the soul, and more importantly, what are the byproducts of what we would call soul energy? Right? Now, one of the first things you'll know, a person who responds to the planet in a very earthly manner, a lot of times will be someone without a soul. And what I mean by that is this. We spoke about Jimi Hendrix earlier, and we said, well, he was unearthly. You know, from the way he talked, the way he dressed, the way he sung. He's up there singing, chewing gum at the same time. You know, very unearthly. Similar to a James Brown. You know, with half of his songs, he was just grunting and yelling. Okay? But we understood him for some reason, some of us. You know, he even said, I got soul power. He's the godfather of soul. So what you'll find is that those who acclimate themselves in a very strong way to the planet, they do that because they don't have that ocean of water waiting for them to return to. All they have is the planet. The only realization that they have is this three-dimensional reality, which they can touch with the five senses. So these are the people who are extremely entrenched in ego. They're extremely entrenched in power, relationships that exist through the five senses. So being able to control their physical environment is the top and the paramount aspiration for them. If they can control their physical environment, this is what they call power. I can live where I want to live. I can crush you like an ant if I want. I can have you incarcerated. I can pull you over and do this to you and do that to you, because they recognize that whatever power that they can achieve here on the planet is the only power that they'll ever have, because they have nowhere else to return to. So you'll see certain byproducts from people who don't possess a soul, very similar to what the question we spoke about earlier, when people say, well, there's no brothers who love the Lord, and you start explaining maybe more energetic concepts and more metaphysical concepts, and they look at you like you're crazy, because they can't understand anything beyond the five senses. So for instance, if I don't proclaim just what they're hearing, if I don't proclaim my love, or I don't write it on a Facebook post what they're seeing, then I don't love the Lord, because they're not able to connect to my energy in a energetic fashion. They can only understand kinetic energy, or physical energy. That's all they understand. So people who are coming without that soul energy, they only really understand the physicality of things. Okay, very similar to certain musicians. If anybody here has ever played music or even drums, and you did a drum circle, and you'll find certain people will come up with their drum, and when you're drumming, there's a certain point where you hit like a groove, what we call a pocket, and everybody's in the pocket, sounding and feeling tight. And then you'll have someone who will be in the pocket and then just go off somewhere else. They can't even feel the pocket when it occurs. They can't feel the groove when it's happening, because they don't have the soul energy that is now just recognized, oh, okay, all the souls have just locked in together. They don't even know what the heck you're talking about. They only hear the math. And the math because once you get into the pocket with music, a lot of times you'll go off beat. But what will happen is that everybody goes off beat together. Okay, that's the soul. That's the spiral of energy. It ebbs and flows like the water's tide. It ebbs and flows. So it's never really linear. It's never consistent or anything like that. So now, a person like that who does not have a soul, who only exists in the five-dimensional reality, will now propose something else. Hey, you know what, guys? Let's put these drums away and let's get ourselves a nice drum machine. Let's put a drum machine here, and we can keep timing with the computer and the chip that's inside the drum machine. Because now I'm going to change and align your rhythm to a computer's rhythm, something that's digital. Because if it's digital and it's linear and it's inorganic, then I can understand it and I can get into the game. This is very similar to what we've seen now with jazz and blues and hip hop. There was a time that hip hop mainly sampled Funkadelic and James Brown and all these other amazing drummers and rhythms that had this, again, unearthly sound to it, and these young people were able to flow on top of that. That was removed, and what was introduced was a synthesizer, and a bastardization of live music came into place with drum machines and things like that, and sequencers and MIDI, and what happened then is now the spontaneity is removed, because everything is happening now on a register and a clock. And once you do that, now anybody can get into the game, because as long as you can count, as long as you understand the simple aspects of math, then you can become an artist, because everything is now working along a grid. So the grid extracts the soul out. So again, and we're still answering the question, those that can only function along the grid are typically those that are soulless. Okay, so there's many different ways to identify, but you want to look at the people who are always looking to extract the organic aspect out of things in their lives, or out of your life, or out of your environment. Those are the soulless people, because they can't understand the soul of an environment, the soul of a tree. They can't understand spontaneity. They don't understand freestyle. They don't have a sense of anything like that. They're only living on the lower levels of existence, and they're fighting like heaven in order to maintain what they have here, because this is all that they'll ever have. Now, is it exclusive to race? Certainly not. And I know that's not the answer that a lot of people probably wanted me to say. Because the truth is, when we look at aspects in science of race, we got to understand that everything that's here on the planet is here to corrupt itself. It's here to transform. So everything has the potentiality to transform itself into something else. So am I saying that a Caucasian person can become an African person? I certainly am saying that. with enough concentration and enough will and focus. And of course, it practically kills them. But they can move themselves into a space. Now, of course, some take the shortcut and they make themselves with an African person so they can start sharing that DNA. They go like George Lucas. They'll do the George Lucas thing, and they'll get themselves in a black or melanated wife. And now they're constantly sharing. There's a DNA exchange that's happening all day. So which now begins to transform them into something else. Or you have it when we go back into the realm of music. You have many musicians who take on rock and blues and hip hop, and the way that they kind of can travel to the highest levels of their astral planes and understanding is that they take drugs. They heavily sedate themselves with drugs. And you'll see that most of them who have these prolific careers in quote unquote black music, they have these horrible legacies that they leave behind because of all this horrific drug use. But they have to do that in order to get to that place. Okay, so it's not exclusive. Having a soul is not exclusive to race, because you have soulless quote unquote black people. And it's certainly not exclusive to gender. Just because a woman may be more emotionally or spiritually sensitive than a man does not mean that she has a soul and a man doesn't. In fact, women have a greater job as it pertains to the soul because of their watery nature. Their job and their mission on the planet is always to remove the imprint of past lives from their souls and from the souls of their family legacy. So they have a different type of charge on them. They always have to remove past imprints. Women are the purgers of soul energy. They remove imprints. So it's not exclusive to race. It's not exclusive to gender. And, a simple way, like I said, that we can use to determine is you look at the products of the soul. When the soul is in alignment with the spirit, the soul knows that it comes from a place of abundance. The soul knows that it comes from a place of connectedness. The soul knows that the planet Earth and planet, when you look at the word, everybody knows what a plan is. It's a strategy, it's a method, it's a means of doing things. And et, whenever you put the suffix et on something, it means a smaller version, like Smurfette. Okay, anybody watches a Smurf. But a planet means the small plan. So if we understand that those of us living on planet Earth, we're only manifesting and living out the small plan, then where lies the greater plan? So once the soul will always remind you that there's a greater plan at stake here. And what you're doing here is nothing but a video game. Like I said last week, this is the small part of the plan. This is the smallest part of you. I don't care if you're 7 feet tall and 350 pounds. That's still the smallest part of what makes up you as a being. Your soul is much more humongous. And on the planet here, what we're striving towards is to be a reflection of our higher self. You can never be your soul. So, it's not that we're saying that when you grow and you travel through life, that you're manifesting yourself fully as your soul. That would burn you up. You would internally combust if you attempt to do something like that. You're always just a reflection of the soul. A reflection of, that's why we say I'm trying to be my higher self, but you're reflecting the ideas and the movements of your higher self. Okay, and your higher self is again the intention of the divine, or what we like to call love. Okay, and those who are unable to reflect the highest self, because what you'll find is that those with soul, when they start to reflect the aspects of the higher self, most of what they say becomes very similar. So it's like what you said earlier, Brother Yusef, in terms of the different spiritual systems around the world. Well, you have Zeus, and you have Odin, and you have Obatala, and you have Osiris, and you have God the Father, so forth and so on down the line. And all of these mythologies and these stories, they seem to reflect one another because they were created by people who were manifesting and living the reflection of the higher self. And if you live and manifest the reflection of the higher self, we're basically all going to do the same thing. We may put a different twist on it, and where the twist comes from is your spirit. Your spirit is what guides and determines the personality of your soul's expression. But the soul is always going to express the same exact thing to everyone. It's going to express, it's the same color of light. Well, actually, the soul has no color of light. It has no character. It just has conscious, directed, and focused will. And its will is to evolve. So everybody who has a soul on the planet, their mission and their movement is towards evolution. Everybody. The soul only evolves. But the way it evolves is individual based on the spirit of the person. The spirit itself has character, but it has no will. That's why spirits can be programmed by someone else's will. Your spirit can be taken over by someone else's will. That's when you're out of alignment with your soul. So your soul, your guiding force, you as God manifested, or Emmanuel, which means God with us, or God in the flesh. You as Emmanuel, or God on the planet, your guiding will and compass is always supposed to be your soul, not the intention and will of anybody else. And when you have that, you'll find that the expression is very similar, or the intention is very similar, or identical. The intention is identical, but the way you do it is determined by your spirit. So our expressions and our character and our creativity comes out differently, but it's all the same movement towards evolution. Those who are not seeking to evolve themselves or their understanding or their position in this dimension or the next dimension are those who are soulless, because this is all they have here. They're just characters that were generated in the video game that we call the planet. And when you turn off the video game, they're going to be gone, because they only exist here. When you unplug this thing, they're out of here. And that is the greatest fear that many people have with the returning of Nibiru or Nebharu, the red planet, because it heralds a purging of the soulless. So what they're doing now is they're scrambling to mate with those who do have souls.
Wow, that's some very, very interesting information. Okay, let me give you a plug real quick, brother. Why don't you give the people your information, your website, how you can be contacted, and then after that, we're going to go to the phone lines, and we've got a lot of people with their hands up, want to get at you. So why don't you go there and give yourself a plug real quick?
Sure. I can be reached at saduluhouse.com. That's SADULUHOUSE.com. That's actually the site for our school. Also, ANU Nation, ANUNATION.org. That is the parent site for our organization, where you'll find a listing of the other sites. You can always find me on Amazon. I even have a Facebook profile. You know, if you look up Yuya Assaaan-ANU, you'll find me. I'm not on it much. I don't do much social networking, but I do, post things that I'm doing once in a while. And I urge everyone, if you go to Sadulu House or even OrishaReligion.com, ORISHARELIGION.com, sign up for the newsletter. You can, connect with me that way. And if anyone has any questions, like after the show, or for any of the callers, if something comes up afterwards, you can always send me an email at questions@anunation.org. That's the word questions at ANUNATION.org. And my team will, make sure that it gets to me.
All right. Well, hey, we got a lot of people want to get at you. You feel like taking some phone calls?
Sure, definitely. Let's talk to the people.
All right, great. All right, well, let me start off in Texas then. Got a lot of people in Texas want to get at you. 832-5863.
Shani Alafia, Baba. Bushi. Baba, I have a concern. I'm a capoeirista also, and one of the issues that we have, dealing with Brazil, is that a lot of people are trying to put a lockdown on the information coming out of, Brazil in regards to capoeira, Angola, and other things of that nature. And there have been some students here that I've been dealing with who have made the decision to, break away and separate from there. And that's something that's been going on for the past 20, 30 years. because we're being used financially, but not always, allowed into the inner circles. And being an Orisha priest myself, I kind of see that in a sense coming from even the traditional Yoruba people, and also from the Cuban community under Alchemy. And I have been under the mindset that we need to do something to where we actually form our own, not so-called separate institution. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. Not trying to separate ourselves from Cuba or Nigeria, but we need to form an institution here that deals with the religious aspects as we have been, dealing with them, and also experiencing. We do have different herbs here. We do have sometimes different spirits that we're dealing with that are not the same spirits, that are in Cuba or in Nigeria, and there's also that real strong hoodoo tradition that we have here, especially down in the south where I'm from in Louisiana. So I was wondering, what do you think about that? And, would that be something that you'd be interested in looking into and developing?
Sure, certainly. Well, firstly, I would say that one of the challenges that we have when we're coming into, embracing our traditions or re-embracing our traditions is that we are being taught information by our students that we forgot that we taught them. So that's the number one problem right there. When you're being handed any corpus of information, or even with our fighting, our fighting styles, our martial sciences, these are things that we created and taught to the world and then forgot about it. And then they come back and teach it to us. But the problem is they forget to mention that we taught it to them. And this is kind of similar to what Brother Yusef and I had mentioned last show, when I had said, 100 years from now, Eminem invented rock and roll. Invented hip hop. And Elvis now was already the king of rock and roll. So we forget. We have these traditions, we have these sciences, we have these arts, and then we don't put the proper value on them. And then those who would come to steal, kill, and destroy, they take them, and then they co-opt them, they put their face on top of them, and then they exclude us from learning institutions when we're just trying to recover our parents' information. They take our inheritance from us, or we give up our inheritance. So that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind when you're dealing with our fighting systems, or I'm saying fighting systems because I don't want to just regulate it to those that came out of Brazil, because there's many systems that we developed and we invented. Wing Chun, Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu. These all come out of the continent. Seya Kali, the knife fighting system. You even hear the word Kali in there, so So one of the things that I think we need to begin to do is, like you said, it's not really an issue of separating, but it's an issue more of reclaiming ownership. And one of the first ways that you can reclaim ownership, which is what I have done with the ANU spiritual training, which is what I teach, is I said, I could certainly emulate and recreate what has been done in the past, but what has been done, because I learned that, I was initiated and trained in a very traditional fashion. When it came to spirituality, I didn't, get my initiations in a weekend or anything like that. It was done properly. I'll say that. And, in terms of how we did things traditionally, and but what I determined was that even how we did things traditionally was an ever evolving process. Okay. So understanding the nature of Olodumare, which we spoke about last time, we understand that Olodumare associates itself in terms of concept with the Kemetic Atum Mare. And if we understand Atum Mare, we're dealing with the atomic beginnings of things. Well, the atomic beginnings means that it's something that's always beginning. So if we are people who would say that we, like you said, I'm an Orisha priest, for us Babalaos and us Orisha priests, those of us who acknowledge the supremacy of Oludumare, what we're actually acknowledging is the supremacy of evolution, of atomic beginnings, of the starts of things. So the way that we reclaim our traditions, spiritual, fighting, cooking, otherwise, everything that we have from a very primal and primitive sense, the way that we reclaim it is evolving it. And once we evolve it, then we'll be able to say, you know what, you can have that. You want to exclude me out of that? Don't worry about it. You keep that. You take that. Because I took it somewhere else. I reclaimed it in the same way that my ancestors created it, because they created it as part of an evolutionary process. So I'm just going to continue on with that process of evolution, as opposed to trying to recreate something that was traditional, because if I do that, then I always put myself in a position where somebody can lord over me. It's very similar to a lot of these young brothers and sisters. I mean, we'll take it even years ago, we take it to MC Hammer. There was a certain model that was used in music. If you wanted to get in, you came in, you got your record deal, and so forth and so on, and we would send you around the world, and the record company was basically nothing but just a big bank that loaned money for you to take your music international. And MC Hammer said, you know what, that's cool, but I think I'm just going to sell my music out of the back of my car. And when he got introduced to his first record deal, he determined that I may sell more with you, but I'm still making more out of the back of my car, so I'm going to keep on doing this. So what he did was he evolved the model to the point that now they had to come to him and beg him for a situation. They had to change their model to accommodate him. So when it comes to your fighting sciences, it comes to our spirituality, what we need to first do before we start forming institutions, we need to determine what our ancestors need from us in order to evolve the model and start working on that. A new model of fighting sciences based on what, like you said, we're here now. Certain herbs and things are not here. So how do we need to fight now that we're here? For instance, the fighting systems that came out of Angola, many of them were long distance fighting systems because you had more space. You were fighting on planes. How do we fight in an elevator? How do we fight in a stairwell? Or when you're going through a revolving door and somebody's trying to pick your pocket because they jump in the section with you, and you just got a little bit of space before they're going to run out and run down the block. How do I lock them up before they get away from me? These are new scenarios that we now have in North America that we don't have anywhere else, and we didn't have. Let's take a look at our new scenarios and evolve our cultural understanding to adapt to that. And I'm certainly interested in any institution, any organization that is aiming to mirror solutions that are applicable to what we need today. I'm not really so interested in recreating what we already had, because if we were supposed to do that, we would have been born back then. We were born here and now as those who are evolving the head of that serpent. So I'm definitely, with that, but I think that's where we need to begin, brother, in terms of reclaiming our tradition. Let them have the old stuff. Let them have it. We can come up with new stuff because we're just that special. We're just that special that we'll just recreate something on the shoulders of what our ancestors already gave us that will be better, bigger, better, and badder than what they had before. Right,
yeah, because, that's very important too, because like I always talk to my wife, because she's initiated too. It's like, what would happen to us if we don't have no contact with Nigeria? How are we gonna get Epo Pupo? We can't grow the plant here. We don't have our scientists to enable us to have the plant grow in this field. We can't have those tropical plants grow over here, so we would be really lost. So we need to come up with other things.
Well, the first thing to understand, when you understand the science and the energy of Osayen's energy is the energy of alchemy. When you look at the first part of his name, Osa relates itself to the understanding and the concept of the tide. the tide of water. Okay, so one of the terms that we have here is, or the phrases is the tides of change. Okay, but Assaan more specifically deals with the alchemical process of the planet. So it's not necessarily that you're getting a certain herb because it's prescribed in the Odu and I have to do this. Assaan is saying, I will make that herb what you need it to be. You go outside, get yourself some poison ivy, and we'll use that to fix your court case, because we can't find this other thing. You know, you go outside and just get you some mugwort that's growing all around the side of your house that you can't seem to get rid of, or some dandelion. You know, so it's that George Washington Carver energy. You know, when you're going out in the field and you're speaking with the crystals inside of the plants and you're having that conversation with them and saying, well, hey, you know, will you work? And that's traditional. You know, when you really get into the traditional understanding of Yoruba, or the traditional understanding of these African systems, it wasn't about locking yourself into a set of rules and regulations. That's the religion. Oh, I gotta use this herb. I gotta stand like this. I have to wear this color. I have to say this Adora or this Iwori in this manner in order for me to invoke this energy. No, it's about when you move beyond Orisha and come into the realm of Ori, which is the soul, what we just finished speaking about. When you come into that realm of Ori, then you determine what that plant is going to be. You look at the mugwort and say, you know what? You're going to do this today. I know what you normally do, but today this is what you're going to do. Because it's no different than what you do with water. You know, when you say your prayers or your chants over water and then you drink it or you use it for libations, it's no different. Right before that, it was just some nasty tap water. But you performed an alchemical process on it. So that's what needs to happen with everything we're touching in this time. Alchemy. And alchemy is the science of divine blackness, coming right from Kim, Al, Kim, from Kemet, blackness, Al, meaning the definitive article of God. So alchemy is the divine aspects of the divine science of blackness. We need to apply that to our spiritual systems. We need to apply that to our fighting systems. We need to apply that to our food. Everything has to be alchemicalized through our understanding and through our aspirations of soul energy. Once you're tapping into that soul energy, you make whatever you want it to be it. This is why young children were able to take turntables and make them into instruments. Or we was able to go into the Caribbean and take oil drums and make them into steel pan drum instruments and make all these beautiful sounds of water, which was sacred to Oshun and Oya and Nanan Buklu and all these water energies, just out of an old oil drum. You know, they even use car rotors and brake rotors in Trinidad as another instrument. That's alchemy. You know, so it's really about performing alchemy in this day and time. And you can only perform proper alchemy when you tap into that dark soul energy, or what we call the Akashic realm, or in Yoruba, that realm we call the Okan, O-K-A-N, which also means heart, the Okan. When you tap into that indifferent energy of your heart, or the heart chakra, then you can start performing effective alchemy. And you can let people have the old system, because you're pretty much going to extract all the soul out of it anyway, and you're going to take it with you to the next place. Same thing with the herbs. We got other herbs here. This is where Ochosi came in. Ochosi is not big in Nigeria. Ochosi is big over here, because in Ochosi, whenever you see pictures of him, he's depicted as a native. You know, like he's one of the First Nation members here. Because what they're saying is that this energy of Ochosi, who's a tracker or the hunter, he hunts out solutions. So when our ancestors came here, the solution was to join with the natives, the First Nation who was here, and get their understanding of herbs and sciences and the incense and the oils that they use. So it's time for us to do that again. We got to develop our own new understanding for the new African.
Okay.
All right. All right, appreciate it. We got a lot of people their hands up. Let me take some more calls real quick, okay? We jump to Georgia. I believe this is Georgia. Make sure real quick. It might be wrong. Let's see, Georgia too quick. It is Georgia, Central Georgia. 478 area code 2364. You're on high frequency radio. Georgia, hit your mute button. All right. Let's go to 347 4152.
347 area code. All right, well, these people, hit your mute button. I'm going to get somebody. People. 336-9930. $336-9930.
Yeah, peace.
Peace.
Peace to the God, man. Yeah, peace, brother.
What's going on?
Yeah, peace, Yusef. Peace, brother. What's your name again, brother?
Yuya.
Say that again?
Brother Yusef and I, but my name is Yuya. Brother Yusef and I have the same name.
Okay,
Yuya is the Kemetic form of Yusef. So
okay.
Is Yuya.
Yeah, brother, you touching on, I mean, this is a beautiful thing that you and both you brothers are doing, man, because this right here is going to be the key to us actually moving forward in our travels as we're moving through this matrix that we're dealing with in all aspects of life. And the main key is definitely it's definitely spiritual and it's definitely you're eating the right foods and putting the right minerals and everything in your body. And I'm like the same way with the vibrations. I deal with the vibrations of people. You know, it's some people that we don't even have to even say a word to sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Because our spirit, especially if we're one within ourselves. In other words, that we are. Some people are not comfortable even in their own spirit and even in their own body. So they cannot ascend or even move forward. They wonder why they're stagnated. They're stagnated in their thoughts and their mind and their action and everything they do. And this is a big problem that we're having with everything as a whole. So I mean, what you're doing is speaking upon and expounding on, and it's a universal thing. What you're doing. Because it covers everything. Yes, it covers everything in its entirety. It does, and this is what people have to realize. And I'm glad Yusef did this. You know what I'm saying? Because this right here, everybody got their hand up, but ain't nobody saying nothing. But this is the whole thing about being conscious. You got your hand up and doing all this. You got to be focused and tune in, and this is what it's about. About paying attention, being observant, being all these things. And that's being on a total spiritual plane. And that's, I'm still getting there. I'm not, I don't think, I can't really say that. But at one point I might, in this lifetime. I may move on and keep, but I don't never feel that we get to a point where we stop evolving. That we stop, we come to a point where, okay, I made it and I'm here and I'm, and this is it. This is it right here. It's just that we have to look at it in a spiritual, in a godly perspective, in a godly plane. So, this is beautiful what both of you are doing right now, expounding on. This should help a lot of people with going into the courts and dealing with all different types of situations.
Exactly, and I like what you said about. I like what you said about being attentive, because I'm real big on that attentive thing, especially when it comes to women. Like I used to always say, if I take a woman, I like to take a woman with me to a business meeting, and if I take her into a business meeting, and we're sitting there because I'm taking her because I understand that they perceive things that I don't see. So if I take her into a business meeting with me, and then after the meeting, I ask her, what did you think? What did you see? And she's like, I don't know. I was just, I don't know. I was just, I'm like, and I can't get anything from her. But if she comes out the meeting and see what, I think you need to watch that other gentleman. He seemed to be like so-and-so, and I think, and then she started giving me some feedback. That's what I look for. It's like some people are just not attentive. There's two certain things that some people are.
Exactly. And brother, what the brother expounded on was beautiful when he was speaking about brother, you nailing it like on point with it, because it's so true about the Pisces and about them being trapped in the water and being an upstream, downstream, and everything. And I'm an Aquarius, so I'm the water barrier.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so no doubt.
Me too. Shout out to Aquarius.
Peace, God, peace. That's what's up. See, I felt to see mine, not take mine, bro. This is what it's about.
Right.
We're all connected. I'm just listening to your vibrations, your calmness in your voice. That's why I can tell, I can see you that you are within yourself. You're all over, universal. But I'm just saying though, you're one with yourself. Like you know who you are. Both of you brothers know who you are. And now, and I don't know if people know this, but we are in the age of Aquarius right now. So therefore, this is the information age. This is what this is. It's the highway information age right now. So Aquarius, and this is how we are, brother. My birthday is the 30th. When's yours, brother?
I'm on the 17th.
Okay. All right.
That's right.
Okay, right there. My mom was like the 19th. But yeah, that's it, brother. And that's the whole point. And we strive for this information, brother. A true Aquarius strive for information, man. We have to know. We want to know. We cannot be in the dark. We have to know what's going on. We have to know what's going on all around us, because it has a profound effect on me. Because what I'm doing is I have vibrations that go out, brother, and they're not being receptive because, like you said, these people have no soul. They don't even know who they are. They can't even identify with any of these things because they think that it doesn't pertain to them, but everything does. And just like when people understand or understand that everything that this show is dealing with has a universal and profound effect on everything that we come in contact with. That's what people got to think. We want to think that everything is separate. Everything is not separate. Everything is connected. No matter how you want to place it and put it here and put it there, it's all connected. Regardless, people want to see, just like speaking about the people, about why the people are disconnected, is because that's one of the devices and the tools that they use. We ain't saying no color. We're just talking about people and period, because we enslaved our own people. So it doesn't matter. So what I'm saying is a universal thing. Everything is all connected. So when people realize that and stop separating everything, because that's one of the greatest tools they use is to divide us, to make us think that we're all different.
Right. Well, what's very interesting is similar to what Brother Yusef just said, like dealing with the meetings with that being kind of a litmus test that he allows sisters to go through. But, it takes us back to what you were first saying, vibration. And one of the things you said is that, you sense and you feel the vibration. And it's basically a frequency, because things vibrate at a frequency. And everything that's on the planet is vibrating, because everything is made of molecules and atoms, and they don't sit still. They're constantly vibrating. So it's very important when we look at that, just that idea of even the chair that you're sitting on or the shoes that you have on your feet right now, they're actually moving. Nothing sits still on the planet. Nothing that's made of molecules is actually sitting still, but they just vibrate at different rates. So the things that are vibrating slower, they come together and they condense into matter. And this is what, we have something that's physical. Things that are vibrating at a faster rate, they move beyond matter. This is where we get stories of, back in the days, I used to hear things in Nigeria of old men walking through rocks and stuff like that. I had a friend of mine, his grandfather, used to walk through rocks, through like stones and stuff. He would just disappear inside the rock because he was able to speed up his vibration to that rate where he would just go right through. And he's transcending, or what we call transcend, or he's transforming. He's transcending his form through matter, so it's similar to when we're speaking about different people and we say, well, some people are just happy with stagnating. But if you understand that everything is moving, then you never actually stagnate. You're either evolving or you're devolving. There's no, okay, I studied some books, I'm going to relax for a little while and I'm just going to, be still. There's no such thing as that. You're either you're vibrating forward or you're vibrating backwards. So you got to make a decision on which way we're going to go, because there is no sitting still. But like similar to what he was saying with the young lady, you bring them into a meeting, and if they're vibrating at a very slow rate, this is where we get alchemy from, because lead for instance, things that vibrate at a higher rate, they're more conducive to things to travel. So, for instance, you have gold, you have copper, and these are two elements that are they're very good electrical conductors, because things travel through them easily. They don't have what we call in electronics, they don't have high resistance. Okay, but then you have something like lead, and lead won't really conduct electricity that well. And lead is also a very soft element. If anyone has ever had an opportunity to have a piece of lead in their hand, like fish weights, if anybody's ever gone fishing, and the weight that you put on your bait to make it sink down is usually made of lead, and you could chip away with it with your fingertip. It's not a hard metal, it's just very heavy, it's very dense, and it doesn't conduct electricity well. Well, if it's not conducting electricity well, that means it's not conducting or passing energy through its body very well. So that's a form of the beginning stages of alchemy. Now, in alchemy, we always hear about, well, I need to turn lead into gold. So what you're basically saying is, I need to transform myself or an object or a person into someone who doesn't receive energy or let energy flow through their meridians, into someone who can take on and is attractive to energy or electricity. Or in electricity and energy and fire, they represent evolution, they represent change, they're evolving energies, the fire energies. So when something goes through that alchemical process of going from lead to gold, it is now more conducive and for change and for evolution. So like the young lady you might describe who goes in the meeting is like completely unaware of what's going on, she's probably more malleable. She's probably like lead, where she's softer in that she may be more easily influenced by media and by societal changes and external factors, but she's unable to channel the energy and the vibration of a room through her body, because she's still functioning as lead. She's not gold. A golden person will come into that room and without anyone even speaking will know exactly where this meeting is going, who doesn't like you, who does like you, who's trying to rob you, who's going to be a headache, and who's even sending a certain type of energy your way. Because that gold, this is why the Negara and the Negaru, or what some people like to call the pharaohs, this is why in ancient Kemet or Egypt, they ate gold. They ate gold to make themselves more conducive to the electrical energy of the planet or the universe, so they could receive the messages that they needed. So alchemy is also about being able to pay greater attention in a simplistic way. You could pay better attention when you make yourself more open and conducive to knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Exactly, and I feel that a lot of people, or individuals, or just people, period, they just do not definitely don't comprehend that whatsoever. I mean, people come in there because, like I said, they feel they're not confident, or they don't know themselves. They're not one with themselves. So there's a lot of people, when people like Yusef just said, like when you come into the room and a woman like that, like we're speaking about, that we need next to us, not behind us, not in front of us, next to us, because she takes on other things. She's going to draw a different type of energy towards you, towards her, and everything. Like you say, you'll be able to see, like you said, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, and then as you see, if they're focusing on her, and really just won't be focusing on you, or focusing, at the time, unless she's speaking. If she's speaking, then it's different, but she's just there just to kind of pull people out and draw people out. Like, in other words, expose people. That's how I feel. Like, she's there to expose people for who they are. You know what I'm saying? And not what they be. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing right there. So, and people gotta understand where we are conducted. You know what I'm saying? We're like one of the most conductive things out here. You know what I'm saying? Because of the water. Remember, 70% water. So that, and then we don't have the alkaline levels that are in the water. That's why we need to drink live water. You know what I'm saying? Because that is that water that we drink now, that foster water, or sewage water, whatever, it lacks the minerals and substance that we need, and it does not spread throughout the body like it should. It sits there, and this is the one reason why We need that live water because it will flush us out. It will purify us. The water that we have now is not purifying us now because it got this fluoride and all this other stuff in it now. You know what I'm saying? That's messing with everything that has to do with our body. And, you know, I've been a vegan for 30 years, brother. I've been a vegan, and my name is energy. That's my name. And that's all we are, is energy. And I choose that name for myself. No one gave me that name. I choose that name for myself. I had an understanding of who I was. You know, so I've been a vegan. I've been doing the vegan thing for 30 years. So I've been conscious and had knowledge of self for quite a while. And I'm still going on. I won't reach a point where I get to this so-called apex that people think that they get. You know, we're always constantly evolving because I believe in the afterlife, you know, and we had a previous life. So, you know, for people that can't overstand that, oh well. You know what I'm saying? You know, hopefully you'll get there. But, you know, I hope this right here, what we're expounding on right now, will open people's eyes and let people know and understand that this all is a nothing but an illusion. What we're dealing with now, everything, the courts, everything, but I'm talking about these inanimate objects. And for people who don't know what inanimate objects, even this is what the brother just said. The object to us, to the physical eye, is not moving, but but everything has a vibration, even inanimate objects. That means
Right.
Objects that appear that are not moving to the naked eye. That's what an inanimate object is. So
Okay, brother. Okay, I appreciate your comments, brother. I appreciate it. We got a lot of people who want to talk to my brother, okay?
Yeah, peace, brother. Don't worry, brother. We're going to get together, and we're going to keep vibing, brother.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's go back to the phone line. 914 area code. I guess we'll let's dip up to New York real quick. New York. 914. I want to get you in real quick. Just a second. Greetings. Peace.
Peace, brother. Yusef, you put me on as soon as I get out here this crazy wind, man. But anyway, it's a blessing to be online with you, brothers. I got a question. You were speaking earlier about energy. Can somebody, well, in the Bible it says that the Most High told Satan that he could do anything he wants to do, but he couldn't touch his soul. My question with that is, people having trouble making transformations in their life, being stopped doing things out there, if it's drugs or whatever, or gambling. Is it possible that someone could tie an energy to an individual that will impede them from making that habit?
Certainly. Yeah, you definitely can. First thing, let's go back to your first statement. And when we're speaking about not being able to touch the soul, understanding that Satan, or what we knew in our Kemetic pantheon as Set, this was the deity over materialism. Okay, so Satan is the deity or the archetype over materialism. Not a bad thing, not a good thing. We're not talking about good versus evil or anything like that. We're talking about polarities. So Satan being a deity over materialism, that means that Satan only deals with things that exist on the earth plane, on the earth realm, things that you can touch with your five senses, things that deal with third dimensional reality. So again, the soul does not live on the planet. The soul lives beyond the planet, so that therefore Satan is not able to touch the soul. However, spirits are generated when you come on the earth, and they're released when you leave, unless someone maintains their liberty. What does that mean? That means that before you came to the planet, you came with a soul. You had your soul, and your soul was wrapped into flesh, this flesh body that we have, and it was also accompanied by a spirit, which is your spirit. So in this season, we'll take Brother Yusef, for example. He came down, and his spirit created this character. And like I said, he's nothing but a video game character or a character on a stage of Yusef L. And his name is Yusef L. He looks a certain way. He sounds a certain way. He likes these type of jokes. He likes liver. He don't like liver. He likes asparagus. Don't like asparagus. These are all products of the spirit. Now, when he transitions and his soul goes back to its home, the spirit can either dissipate. It will either dissipate, or it can stay in a form if the people who are still here possessing spirits keep that spirit alive. So for instance, we know our dear brother Nelson Mandela just transitioned yesterday. Now, I guarantee you his spirit will be here on the planet for a very long time, because people will keep doing things to keep his spirit alive. They're going to play music. They're going to dance. We're going to see a bunch of T-shirts with his face on it, so forth. They're going to probably have a movie on his life or another movie on his life and documentaries, so forth and so on. And all of these things keep his spirit alive. And the spirit is just an earthly fabrication. It's only what you need when you're here on the planet. So now, let's take that now to your question in terms of, can a person's progress of transformation be impeded if someone can attach something to their spirit? Certainly, because the spirit can be accessed by other earthly entities. Okay, so the soul can never be accessed by earthly entities, and this is where we get the 42 declarations of Ma'at. And in the 42 declarations of Ma'at, it basically, I won't go through them, but it declares the perfection of the soul, not of the person. The person transmutates, the person changes, the person is not really the person is going to be corrupted. It's very similar to what the brother said earlier when he said he's an Aquarius. I said, so am I. I really should have qualified that statement or clarified it and said, my body is an Aquarius. I was born physically as an Aquarius, but I'm not an Aquarius because I live beyond Zodiac signs. I live beyond astrology. I live beyond even what my spirit dictates and what my spirit wants to do. Because my spirit changes based on either the room that I'm in, the season that I'm in, the mood that I'm in. The spirit is always changing and fluxing and going all over the place. But the soul stays perfect. These are the 42 declarations of Ma'at. That's why when you realize that the 42 declarations of Ma'at were the basis and the guidelines for the 10 commandments, which were stolen out of 42 declarations, whereas the 42 declarations say, I have not, I have not, I have not. The 10 commandments say, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. It's a warning not to do certain things because it's speaking to the spirit of a person, not to the soul. The soul doesn't need that warning because it doesn't do any of those things. But those who only possess spirit, they can do things that are against the nature and alignment with the soul. So you can tap into someone's spirit, certainly, but more than tap into it, because you don't really need to do that. You don't need to put something in place. You can program a person's spirit through the programming of their subconscious mind. And this is what we have when we look at certain symbology in movies, certain names, language, colors that we're told to wear, clothing styles that we're told to wear. The fact that most of us, for 95% of our lives, we're walking on concrete and not soft soil. We sleep up high in beds instead of feeling the vibration of the earth. And like the other brother was talking about, the water, the mineral, the foods. I mean, I won't go on and on and on. But these are the things that will have an effect on the subconscious mind, which can then have an effect on the spiritual psychology or the spiritual intelligence, and it can cause a hindrance to someone evolving. But your life raft is the fact that the soul is never touched. The soul is never blemished. The soul is never tarnished. So in order to come back from those things, all you need to do is to tap back into soul energy. And the soul will dissipate the wayward parts of the spirit. And I want you to look at your spirit very similar to vampirical energies. Now, vampirical energies, they dissipate in sunlight. They can't stand sunlight, they burn up. Now, your sun or your sunlight is your first eye. okay, which we also call the third eye or the pineal gland, but it really should be called the pineal organ. For those who have an active pineal, it's more of an organ than a gland. But that's the Son of Man. When they ask Christ, well, who are you? Or say, I'm the Son of Man. The Son of Man, the S-U-N of man, or the most high in your body, is that brow chakra or that pineal organ. Or in Yoruba, for those who are listening, we call that the Ori Iwaju. The Ori Iwaju. That's an aspect of the soul. And when that's blinking, or when that's, the sun has got its full blast, and during that, your personal summer solstice, when your sun is highest, it burns out and dissipates all the vampirical energy that may have attached itself to your body. No different than the movie Blade or Underworld or Dracula or anything else you want to see. It dissipates spiritual energies that are not in alignment with it. They can only live in the shadows. So a person can continue to have an energy or something, an impotence attached to them, if they continue to dwell in shadow energy and not come into the light of the sun.
Awesome. So therefore, to liberate yourself, to annihilate those energies, you basically have to do some kind of practice to reconnect with your soul, and that will free you from those energies. That's what you're saying, correct?
Right. Reconnecting with the soul is disconnecting from the earth. Okay, and disconnect. Remember, like we talked about Satan, Set. Satan or Set represents the earth, the planet, materialism. So the more you detach from your material attachments, the more you come into the place of the soul, which is at that crown chakra. Because when we're dealing with that crown chakra energy, or anything that exists above the heart chakra, you'll notice that none of those energies really connect with like emotions, anything that you would need on the planet. They don't deal with emotions. They go beyond the emotional body, beyond the physical body, and they're all dealing with metaphysical concepts. The more you stay up there, the more you'll rebalance yourself out, and you'll begin to activate that energy up top there. So what it really is, it's not like you have to find some big deep practice. So for those who are listening, I don't want you to feel like, oh man, now I gotta figure out a set of 50 rituals to now do. No, what you're doing is you're detaching from your material attachments. Your material attachments are not, okay, I'm gonna get my watch away, I'm gonna get my car away. It's your relationships, your perception of your relationships with people on the planet and things on the planet. So that even goes to your children. Your children can be a hindrance to your transformation because you have this attachment to how you feel they're supposed to turn out. Well, I'm conscious and I eat a certain way and I watch documentaries and I go to lectures, but my children are just not into it, and they just into, culture that is against, what we're about. Well, your attachment to your expectations for your children is one of the things that's keeping you in hell. Or your attachment for what you perceive that relationship should be is what keeps you in hell. That is what Satan rules over, or what Set rules over. It's your attachment to earthly concepts and earthly items and objects. When you begin to remove that, then people have less of an opportunity to attack you and impede your spiritual growth. Because it's very similar to what the brother called about earlier when he was talking about the different martial systems and martial arts systems and so forth. And I said, you know what? Let them have that. Because their attachment to what capoeira is, or their attachment to Orisha tradition, that's an earthly concept of that attachment. That's dead at the end of the day, so let them have it anyway. And you go back up to heaven and you get the information for what the new representation of those things should be. So for the individual, what you're going to be doing is tapping into that brow chakra to understand your new self shape. And when you understand your new self shape, your brow chakra will dissipate the old self shape that you don't need anymore, or the old self identity that you no longer need.
I say. So therefore, if somebody had just a work or whatever to put something on you, if you go to that particular origin and in yourself and above yourself, you clear yourself of that. Therefore, you can be who you're meant to be.
Whatever they did work on.
Whatever they did work on is now an old form or an old corpse. It's an old shadow of what you once was. So it's just like I've gone through things in my life, and actually 914, I'm from Mount Vernon, so let's look at it like this. When I grew up in Mount Vernon, there was things that I went through that I would say some of them were traumatic. But when I look back on them now, I say, wow, that guy really went through some things. Man, I feel bad for that kid who went through that stuff. But I didn't go through it. You see, so if anybody attached something to my spirit at that time when I lived in Mount Vernon, that identity I've since transformed beyond. I've gone. That's just a corpse that we're dealing with. So they're sticking pins and needles into a corpse of an identity that I no longer possess and I no longer carry with me. And I was able to shed that old identity through first eye or third eye activity, work, and meditation. I transformed, I transcended, or trans means to go across. And form, you have form. So you change or you go across your form. You become a new form. You know, in a very simple way, I'm even darker than what I was at 25. You know, a lot of people have noticed that I was always of a much lighter hue, and all of a sudden then I just got like much browner. And I understood because around that time and that age, I really got heavy into dark art, into understanding melanin. Around that age, dark matter, cosmic matter, and it changed my physiognomy. It actually changed how I looked physically because my first eye or my pineal organ became more active. And when my pineal organ became more active, I began to process more melanin. And in me processing more melanin, my skin color actually changed. I look different than I looked at 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I look different today because of that transformation, changing and transcending my form.
Let me ask you a quick question. Just caught my attention. You know, I've read some old documents. In particular, I was listening to one called "The Emerald Tablets of Thought," which was very interesting, translated by some man named Doriel. But in there, it was something that struck me when it was teaching you how to retain this spirit from lifetime to lifetime. I kind of associated with memory. Is that the reason that the key to eternal life is to be able to remember from lifetime to lifetime and to be able to retain that. And what is your take on immortality then? Is it a retention of the identity of this spirit, of this character that you just talked about? Is that possible? What is your take on that?
You hit the nail on the head. When we're dealing with the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, everyone should also first understand that Thoth is Tahuti. And for our Yoruba people, Tahuti is a Rumula. Okay, so Rumula, Tahuti, Moses, Thoth, they're the same person. Even Thoth is also a form of Hermes. Okay, and we spoke about the Book of the Kabbalion before, which associates itself also with the Hermeticus, book as well. So again, we're still dealing with just African thought here, So what you're speaking about is the reason why you're doing this show and I'm having this conversation and everybody's calling in, because what our soul is attempting to do is to invigorate and ensure our spiritual ego. Okay, you have various egos. You have a human ego and you have a spiritual ego. The human ego wants to attach itself to your human identity, what we perceive of in our reality of you to be. Your spiritual ego strives and aims to attach itself to your spiritual evolution that you've achieved in this lifetime and to retain it through lifetimes. This is what happens when people come back through. They come back to the planet and they just know stuff. Like the brother said, we're in the age of Aquarius. They're not trying to figure it out. They're not thinking their way through it, but somehow they just know, because it's the same thing what you said. They were able to maintain their consciousness through lifetimes. That is why we're doing this, because when we go to the next place, we don't want to start over again as babies. When we go to the next realm, when we transition to the next place, we want to transition with our spiritual ego or our soul or spiritual intelligence still intact. And the only way you can do that is by transforming your spirit to the point that it's almost like a soul. So a good example would be here on earth as humans. We have we'll go back to the Christ, to the Jesus thing. We have the representation of Jesus and how he lived on the planet. And as Christians, what people are supposed to do is to strive to be Christ-like. This was to be like Jesus or God on earth. But God on earth is still not God. It's a lesser form, but it's the closest you're going to get while you're here on the planet. So the same thing with your spirit. As long as your spirit will never become your soul, but as long as it can stay in alignment with the soul's mission and the soul's objective and the same aim of the soul, it begins to take on the intelligence and the knowing of the soul. Okay, this is why this was in the book of Thoth, because remember that Thoth or Tahuti is the diviner. He is the word. He is the divine words of the Most High. Tahuti or Thoth is the one that gave the words of power, as they're called, which is also a X-Clan song, verbs of power. But he gave the words of power to Horus or Heru so that he could defeat Set, his uncle. So, or he could go into battle, let me say that, so he could properly be prepared for battle. He gave him words of power. Okay, so Tahuti is the one, or Thoth is the one who gives us the words straight from the divine, or the information straight from the divine, so that we can be our higher self. So what that's speaking about, those emerald tablets, remember, when you're dealing with the substance of emerald, you're dealing with the heart chakra. And the heart chakra deals with your unconditional and undifferentiated truth, which, like we say, it is what it is. So now, when you're expressing that concept, when you're dealing with this concept of maintaining the spiritual ego, you maintain and you retain your spiritual ego by tapping into that divine word, or those words or verbs of power, like Proverbs, verbs of power. And the more that you imbue and program your spirit with that, the greater the chance that you're going to hold on to that spiritual intelligence through lifetimes, because now the spirit is strong enough to take the journey with you. And its form that it is, when you're just coming into consciousness, it's barely strong enough to make it through the earth journey with you. It's going all over the place. It's getting you addicted to drugs and, wants all these different highs of ecstasy, because it's not strong enough to generate those highs on its own. But the way you empower the spirit to generate those highs is through words of power. Tahuti, Orunmila, Moses, John Henrik Clark, Dr. Ben, these were all reincarnations of Tahuti or Thoth, and gave us words of power.
Interesting. Oh, let me bring him back in. You had a lot of background noise. Okay, ask your question, brother. We're gonna take another call. All right.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, brother Yusef. I'm declaring also, not that it matters, because I believe system and energy that we come to Earth with, but I really appreciate what you're saying, and that also, just like the pics say it here in the physical form, we start off employed one way, but by the time we retire, we have various jobs, so in a sense, we basically have different lives each time. Each time brings about more salary and more experiences. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for the information.
Oh, you're welcome, brother.
All right, thank you. Let's go on. Let's go get down to Maryland real quick. 410-1024. You're on High Frequency Radio, Maryland.
Islam.
Islam.
Yes, sir. Brother Yuya, you spoke to me a few days ago on the last class, and shared with me that I had a duty to deal with water and women. And I got off the phone all excited.
Right, I remember you.
Yes, sir. And I got off the phone all excited and everything, and thinking that, okay, I got it. But then I'm looking at water, and I don't know really which direction I should be going in, because all of the ideals that you've shared today are basically, well, the water is already used. We need I need a new way to look at water, how to charge it, and that's the main idea. And the other idea is how does silver fit in with the gold and the copper for electrical charging.
Okay, cool. You're right in. You don't realize it, but your question is your answer. You're right in alignment. Okay, so the water is already being used, but is the actual water being used? And I don't mean to sound rhetorical, but we have the physical manifestation of water, certainly. And in many traditions and things, we go and we bathe by the water. We give honor to Mama Water and all that other good stuff. But we oftentimes neglect to tap into the animating energy that exists inside of the water. Okay, so it's just like when we go into nature and we admire the trees and we admire the mountains and so forth and the earth. We don't realize that we're not actually looking at anything beautiful. We're actually looking at something very grotesque. True beauty cannot be perceived with the five senses. True beauty can only be perceived with the soul, because whatever you perceive with the five senses is a after effect and even a distracting representation of what truly is there. You're supposed to get distracted by all of the wonderful properties of water, of physical water, and that distraction is supposed to lead you on a lifelong mission, so that you never actually even take time to understand, well, what is water at a soul level? What does water represent? For instance, we know that water represents nationalism. How do we know that water represents nationalism? Because nations are always built along waterways. Okay, so what you're really doing is you're tapping into not just what you can do with water, in terms of, well, I can squeeze some lemon in it and I can alkaline it in that manner and, do things like, not the physical aspects of water, but the underlying metaphysical and energetic aspects of water is what you're supposed to be dealing with. Once you tap into the underlying energetic aspects of water or any element, then you're able to properly use the element. You're not really even using the element until you do that. As long as you're approaching it from external to internal, you're never going to understand it. You have to approach the elements from internal to external. And once you approach them from internal, then you can start transmutating them into what it is that you need them to be and what you need them to do. So just like I gave the example of copper and I gave the example of gold, does that mean that we should wear copper on our bodies and gold on our bodies to do certain things? We certainly can. And there are tools that we can use for our spiritual development. But what's more powerful is to understand why they transmit energy in the way that they do. Or why it helps us to understand economy, for instance. Because our money is called currency. But then you also have water currents. And through different metal conductors, electrical current is sent. So if you understand the way electricity moves, you'll understand the way money moves. If you understand the way water moves, you'll understand the way electricity moves. It all works the same way through currents. What is a current? And how do I go with the current? How do I go against the current? And how do I generate my own current or currency? Okay, so once you understand that, then you'll get deeper or closer to the understanding of, well, then if I can generate my own currency, and now I'm dealing with the underlying subcontext of what water is, then now I can turn this into anything I want in terms of my healing works. And it may just be something that I bathe with myself to increase my healing, what we call ashe, or my healing chi, or my healing life force. Now, how does silver come into place? Silver is a soul metal. This is what we use when we're dealing with silver. We're dealing with aspects of the moon. Okay, just as gold associates itself with the sun, silver associates itself with the moon. And when we're dealing with silver, we're dealing with the reflection or the retainment of your connection to your soul energy. Okay, it is often said that the spirit or the soul is attached to the body by a silver link chain. Okay, we hear that in a lot of different traditions. It's a silver link chain that attaches your doppelganger or your soul to your body. And if one is able to disrupt that chain, weaken it, or cut it, then they're able to dispossess you from your body. And that's where we have stories of zombification. Okay, so one of the things that they do, like in hoodoo or in many other traditions, they always made sure they kept silver in their pockets or around them, because it was said to strengthen their connection between themselves and their soul. Okay, now going to the same example that I gave with water, that doesn't mean now that we go worship silver. But we get all excited about silver, or even the moon. It's not about that. They may look pretty in the sky, and silver may look nice when it's on your body, and so forth and so on. But that's all that is Set, or Satan, or what we have in a tradition, Eshu, presenting a trick in front of you. The physical silver is a trick. The physical water is a trick. And these entities are trying to see what you're going to pick. Are you going to pick the fake water, which is the one you can taste and you can feel and you can hold, or are you going to pick the real water, the one that can't be perceived with your body? So the same thing with silver. Are you going to pick the fake silver and you're going to adorn yourself with that and say, see, look, I'm on my spiritual stuff. Look at me. I got all the silver all over me. I'm burning my frankincense. I'm on it. Or are you going to pick the real concept and underlying meaning of what that silver is, and that represents your strength and your attachment to your soul, and that comes through representing itself as water energies. Water, especially dark water or seawater, also represents the soul. Why? Because in our perception, it's bottomless and it's dark, and it's different things that live down in there that we would consider to be deformed. Okay, sea creatures is what we call them. Those sea creatures represent your subconscious mind, or the darkness, or the things that exist in the dark that you don't want to tap into, or maybe even your past lives that you don't want to tap into. Okay, so as the gold and the copper transmit, or they conduct electrical energy, which represents enlightenment or knowledge, silver conducts your pathways to tapping into your soul energy, or your past life energy, that water energy, even your emotions, energy in motion. Okay, now you cannot take energy in motion or emotions out of the equation when you're dealing with the healing arts. Most of the time it's dealing with something with because your emotional issues begin to transmit themselves and manifest themselves as issues in your organs. You know, you're dealing with a lot of anger and things like that, and all of a sudden you got liver issues. Okay, but the emotions, or the energy in motion, are fueled by your spirit. If your spirit is going one way, it's going to send your emotions a certain way, and that out of alignment emotion is going to send your organs a certain way, and that's happening so that you can now have a physical representation of what's going on. So you'll look at your liver and you won't say, oh man, I got a bad liver. No, you look at your liver and say, oh man, I'm angry. That's where that comes from. And then you'll look at your anger and say, oh man, I'm angry because I'm out of step with my life purpose. So I feel disconnected. I feel doubtful. I feel hurt. I feel a measure of pain and hurt because of my ego is now making me feel hurt because of something that happened. And the next step after hurt is anger. And then the next step after anger is a jacked up liver. Okay, so you want to deal with internal to external, not the other way around.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, brother.
All right. Man, that's great. I'm just riding out. I've got a lot of people with their hands up. Wow. All right. We got about 20 more minutes left on the stream, y'all. I will go over. You can call in at 424-222-5250. Once again, that's 424-222-5250. Let me go back to my phone lines real quick. Let's jump down to let's go to Georgia real quick. 678-6945. You're on High Frequency Radio. Get them in.
Greetings.
Greetings.
I'm enjoying the show as always. Greetings, brothers. I want to inquire about or ask my question concerning a person's constitution. Let me turn the radio down. Excuse me one moment. Let me turn the radio down. Excuse me one moment. Okay, brother. I want to know about a person's constitution, or what they have called a constitution, a person's constitution, which is supposed to be determined at conception, and it relates to your genetically inherited physical and emotional qualities. Do they actually tie into the Zodiac world, or, your Zodiac sign? Because when I look at the Constitution that I've been dealing with in my life, we don't get along. We don't get along. It's the Constitution makeup is called a lycopodium. Are you familiar with those?
No, not by title. It says, when you say we don't get along, are you speaking about you don't get along with yourself, or you and someone else?
And let me rephrase that. I shouldn't have said we. The former partner or the former spouse. His constitution was determined as being a lycopodium. And when I read some of the attributes, I was very familiar with him based on what was being expressed in, what was actually coming out physically in the marriage and or in the partnership. And my question is just basically centered around whether or not, that term, your constitution, is it truly your Orisha or your zodiacal makeup?
Well, let's kind of start here. When we're dealing with Constitution, it's not necessarily your Orisha or Zodiac makeup. Your Constitution constitutes many different things. Your experiences and your life environment, your home environment, also help to shape and mold what your Constitution is. But ultimately, when you're getting into what we call self-actualization or self-definition, you move beyond those terms. You move beyond what you consider yourself to be constituted to be. And that's really the aim of getting into spirituality, is going beyond it. You don't want to be a slave to it. For instance, when many of us first come into information and knowledge, a lot of us start with the Zodiac because it's kind of accessible, or at least we can look in the newspaper and read the horoscope, and that may kind of give us a little bit of curiosity as to what the Zodiac is or astrology is. But that's a level, and that's a level of it's just like a religion. It's a guide point that you use in the beginning to kind of get a determination on what your body and your emotional or your chakras have an inclination towards. But once you get past that level, you don't need it anymore. So you're not looking at and saying, well, I was born like this. It's like people who gripe about their childhood all the time. Well, my mama didn't love me and my papa didn't. Well, get over it. Yeah, maybe your mother didn't like you. Maybe you were a jerk as a child. Nobody liked you, not even your mother. Get over it. Now we've grown past that, and you can't let those things dictate your entire life journey moving forward. So the same thing happens just as me being born in Aquarius. As a child, I was very silent. I was very, very, very shy. I barely spoke. But when I started coming into more information and people saw that I had some level of wisdom, in my early teens, they wanted to put me on pulpits to preach. So I had to get past my shyness in order to help the people. So I had to become a Leo. And I would imagine myself as a lion, as a Leo, and I was, if you know the Zodiac, that's on the opposite side of Aquarius. So I had to become the exact opposite of what my physical disposition was telling me to do, and what my emotional disposition and what I was born to be. I had to go to the opposite of that to get my work done. Had I not have done that, I would still be stuck in Aquarius reality, which means I can only achieve to Aquarius heaven, and I can only achieve to Aquarius hell. But when you travel around the entire zodiac wheel, which is what you're supposed to do, eventually you'll go through the middle of that wheel. You'll be the 13th zodiac, which is what some people call the Christ. So in the sense of what you're speaking about in terms of having difficulties and connecting with your mate in a certain way, then maybe perhaps you need to change your connecting points, or he needs to change his connecting points. Whoever has the ability to transcend form, or to transform or go beyond what you're told your constitution is that you begin with. Now, does that mean that your core characteristics change? Typically, no. Typically, core characteristics do not change. When I was a child, I didn't like okra. I don't like okra today. I don't like people putting no okra on my plate. It's too slimy. I thought it was too slimy as a child. It's too slimy today. That didn't change. So there's certain core things that will not change about your integral structure. Not to say that they can't, but it just takes a lot of work. But your spirit, or your identity, which is what people perceive to be as your spirit, your character, that is certainly mutable. That certainly can change. What we consider to be the identified constitution of a person. Things that make you upset, things that make you happy, so forth and so on, or your overall disposition, that changes as you travel through the pathways and steps of the Orisha. Each Orisha lives in a different chakra wheel, or a different chakra house. You're not supposed to just stay in the sacral chakra and be wanting to feel pleasure all the time. And you're not supposed to just stay in the throat chakra and be expressing your ideas all the time. It's time to be quiet. You're traveling through the wheels to move beyond the prisons of the chakras, because they're nothing but prisons. The Orisha realities become a prison when you get stuck in them. So now if you're Ogun, you want to fight all the time, or you want to meditate all the time. You're a workaholic. Sometimes you got to move beyond Ogun and become Obatala, where it is what it is. So it's the same thing when it comes to Constitution and Zodiac. Don't get stuck there. You got to move beyond it. You shouldn't even really be. It's important for compassion's sake to understand, like, okay, he's this type of disposition, so therefore I'm not going to really get too upset because I know it's ingrained in his chemistry. But all that does is it gives you a starting point, and it's for yourself as well. So that way he won't get too upset with you. But it gives you both a starting point to realize what part of that will, if we're talking about Zodiac, that you two have started at, and maybe where you need to travel to in order to get some better congruency between the two of you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And what I mentioned the former partner because, because of the transformation or the transition that I've made, and just reflecting back for the sake of, in my future endeavors, I need to be able to recognize these particular people, or this particular makeup that does not resonate with me per se.
No, you're putting yourself back in the prison again. Forget that. You putting yourself right back in the prison. Forget that. The reality is just like it says in the Bible, I became all things to all men to draw them to the glory of Christ. You can become anything you want to become. It's not about, okay, well, I don't like guys who talk too loud because I like to come in a room and forget that. You're locking yourself into an identity which is a prison. That's the energy of Satan. Don't lock yourself into an identity, and certainly don't lock anyone else into an identity. If you meet someone and they're not moving and evolving, you shouldn't want them anyway. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what point of the wheel that a person starts on. That doesn't, I'm giving shout out to the Aquarius when I said, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is if you realize that you have to move around it. So don't go by that. What you're doing by doing that, you're locking yourself back in the prison, because you're not speaking about this disposition. You're talking about your own. Because if you say, well, they have this disposition and this constitution, I don't get along with it. Well, who's I? Who are you talking about? So you telling me this I that I'm talking to this morning, this is going to be the same I tomorrow and the day after? Then that's where the problem lies. It ain't them, it's you. The I is constantly evolving. And the I represents itself as different things and different expressions based on how the spirit evolves. The I will change. And you'll find that maybe what you desire in a mate or whatever has completely changed. But more importantly, when you start living up in that realm beyond your identity group, by default, your soul will attract to you exactly what you need in order to propel you the next step on your journey. Your ex-spouse that you're speaking about sounds like that person was probably your soulmate. Because your soulmate is always the person. Yeah, you're going to say no because you got to get along. The soulmate is not the person that you don't get along with. 9 times... Listen, we don't know. We only listen, sis. Listen. That doesn't matter. I'm not listening to that part. That's only one aspect that we're hearing. Your aspect of the story. What I'm saying is that your soulmate is not someone you get along with all the time. The soulmate is the person who forces you to rip your soul apart and ask yourself critical questions. That's who your soulmate is. Okay, so a lot of sisters always come with that. Well, no, this person was abusive. No, you got to look at your soul orchestrated this experience for you to be with this person, because I guarantee you there was moments that you sat on the edge of your bed or in your car crying and you asked yourself questions that you never thought you was going to ask yourself before in life. And if that occurred in this relationship, that person was a soulmate. It's not about if it felt good or felt bad. It's not about that. It's about what we need to evolve our soul and to ask ourselves critical questions and to answer them. Okay, it's not about, you don't have to marry your soulmate. It's not about that. But there are certain people who come into our lifetime that rip our soul apart. And when our soul gets ripped apart is when we evolve.
Correct. Well, that's what's happening, or what has happened. I have evolved from where I was for the past 15 years in that partnership to where I am now today. So there has been evolution, and it's still going to be evolution. I'm just, learning how to navigate my way without the bumps and the bruises that I'm familiar with. I guess that's
not going to happen until fear is removed. That's not going to happen until you stop being afraid. You're obviously still deathly afraid of a relationship. That's why you're taking all these steps and these movements to ensure that you don't end up in that place again. That's why as soon as I said he's your soulmate, you cut me off. No, he was abusive. That was fear talking, because you didn't even want to hear that this person might have been something, as you perceived, like I was going to say, this person is special, you're supposed to be with him. You didn't even want to hear that. You weren't even open to that information because the fear that's in you locked and stiffened you up. That's death. You can't change with that. So what you need to be focused on more than avoiding trauma in your next relationship is, how do I remove the fear from my DNA? Because as long as there's fear in my system, my DNA, the molecules become stiff, they harden. And once they become stiff and hard and they're not pliable and soft, they don't receive new information and no transformation occurs. You're just tricking yourself into transformation. Work with fear and stick with that for a while. You may be on that for a year. And I know it was 15 years, that doesn't matter. Work with fear and stay there for a little bit, and you're going to see that your understanding of the relationship will start to become a lot more clear as to why it was necessary. And then true transformation will occur.
Well, I'm going to end it after I bring this out. I grew up having dreams where I was always running from a male. And I was either running or flying, to get away. And it was always some type of fearful situation that, I was up against, or, all of my dreams for years, they were centered around that. And what I have come to the conclusion of is that I'm better off with just self. I'm content with just me. And I don't have a problem having a friend, but anything more than that, it's not, I don't want to do it.
Okay,
and yes, I get fear.
And I understand. That is fear, and the dreams that you had were actually your spirit giving you an opportunity to learn lessons about fear instead of having to experience it physically. You were getting signs on things that you needed to study and understand, and instead of doing that, you didn't do it. You just ran, and then you had to now experience it in your physical life. And now you've come to a place where you're saying, you know what, I'm not even going to confront it. So that means you're going to come back to the planet again and deal with it again. No. Until you confront it, that I'll just be alone. No. That's fear talking. You got two main energies on the planet, fear and love. Love connects, fear separates. So now you've separated yourself from your destiny because you're so fearful, because of the pain. And I'm just speaking fast and I'm telling you directly because we don't have a lot of time. But what you just came up with, that's not the answer. I'm telling you, it's not going to work. That's not the answer. You were given those dreams as a gift so that you wouldn't have to go through it physically. But you have to turn around and face it. You're running from a man. Turn around and face that man and confront what you're feeling and absorb that energy. Until you do that, this is going to happen again. And it may not happen. You may not happen in the form of a mate relationship, but it's going to happen in some form. It's going to keep coming up karmically in your life until you address it and deal with it properly, which you have yet to do.
Well, I'm confronting it. I am. It's on a different scale or basis per se. So I am confronting it, and I mean, this is just where I'm at. I'm confronting it. It may not be.
Sis, I want you to do me a favor. When this show is over, I know you're not, but I'm still going to tell you. When the show is over, I want you to go back and listen to the archives and listen to what I said.
Okay.
And I want you just to, with an open heart and an open mind, and if it doesn't mean anything, then just delete it off your computer and be done with it. But just try to listen again to what I'm saying to you. Because if that level of confrontation, because everything I've said so far, you said, yeah, I am doing that. If that was the case, then I wouldn't have had to have said it. So I know it's difficult because there's an attachment emotionally to this pain. And when that occurs, then thoughts get very cloudy. So that's just what I'm going to say on that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I'm listening.
Enjoy your day. All right.
Thank you, sister. Let me interject real quick. We got 60 seconds left on the stream, y'all. A lot of people on the call, so get your place now. 424-222-5250. If you're going to continue, if you're not going to continue listening, you can check out our archives. You go to blogtalkradio.com/high frequency. Check this show and all of our past shows out. And listen to High Frequency Radio. Let's go back to the phone line. Let's go to area code 909. Get in real quick. Let's see, where is this at? We are going to California. Get back to Cali real quick. Wow. Get it in.
Hello?
I'm still here. Hold on. Let me
Reading.
hello. Are you there? Hello, California?
Yes.
Okay, you're on. Okay. You're on here.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Yes. Actually, I wanted to ask about dream states. People sneaking up on you, smiling, jumping on you and shaking and quaking you. You seriously want to throw them off. What exactly is that about? Or could you explain that for me?
What was the last part of the sentence you just said after shaking and quaking?
You would have to throw them off.
You have to throw them off. Okay. A lot of times what's happening is you have an entity who's trying to attach themselves to you. Okay. When you feel that, like, sometimes when we're dreaming, like you said, they're sneaking up and you'll feel a tap. Like when you almost feel like, okay, there's somebody really in this room touching me and tapping me. There's something that you did or someone did that animated an energy. So say, for instance, it may have been something sexual. Someone may have had sex and they fed a phantasm, which is the name of them, or a spirit, because whenever you have sex, there's a humongous amount of what we call ashe or power or chi that's generated in that act. And there's so much energy that it can actually create a being. Sometimes we create a physical child, but even when there's no physical child created, there's always something created. Okay? Now, sometimes inadvertently we'll give energy to those beings that are created, and we give them just enough energy for them to manifest themselves in a physical reality and tap us, touch us, knock something over, or whatever, lose our keys. They just got just enough energy to do that. And what you basically have at that point, you have usually you have an energy that's trying to attach itself to you for the ride. Okay, remember that all energies that exist on the astral planes, they're done away with when the astral planes are done away with. They're not souls. So spirits, hags, phantasms, so forth and so on, they're not eternal. They're not, they're not eternal energies. They're temporal. So their goal, just like everything else's goal on the planet, is to live forever. So a lot of times what they'll do, if you start getting into certain information and you're vibrating and you're moving beyond the lower astral planes, because every time you dream, you go into the astral realm. And the astral realm, there's different levels to it, just like a building. And on each level, you learn something different. Each level is governed by a theme. Some levels you may go, everybody's partying. You may go to another one, it's just sex happening. Another one is all music. And then it just goes and goes and goes until you move beyond the astral realms. This is similar to the movie, with Anthony Mackie. I can't come up with the angels. I can't come up with it right now. Adjustment Bureau. Okay, you should check that out. So, Adjustment Bureau. The movie. Check that out. And it speaks to what I'm speaking about. So some entities can't go to that top floor, but they can go to the top floor if they get what's called an astral traveler or astral mate or astral guide. So they'll try to get you to be their astral guide. A lot of times when you read books on astral projection or astral travel, one of the first things that they'll tell you to do is to find yourself an astral guide. And that's only necessary for people who do not have certain concentrations of melanin, because melanin in itself is an astral guide. So when you're dealing with an entity that only has a spirit and no soul, it will try to attach itself to you so you can take it up through the astral planes along with you as you're traveling. Okay? But the first thing you want to do is when you have those experiences, you want to note how you felt. Like, did it, were you afraid? Did it feel creepy? Or was it just like, man, leave me alone? And your feelings or your emotions will always be the compass as to what's actually going on, what's actually happening. But usually when you have entities trying to creep up on you, when you get that type of sensation, they're creeping up on you and trying to create some type of association, it's a dispossessed spirit that's trying to not possess you, but be with you. It's a parasite. It's a parasitical energy. And very similar. Yeah, But the parasite, this is how it generates. But remember, the parasite only came there to rob you because you fed it somehow. That's the point I'm getting to. It was a feeding that occurred. So what you want to do is you want to be careful. Like if you're doing chants and things like that, make sure you direct what you're doing. Like say if you pour out libations in your house, make sure you say, this is for this. I'm pouring this water out to grandma, so that way tomorrow I'll be safe on my trip to so-and-so. You want to use your word power to direct all of the energy that's being expended in your home. Even that, and I know it may sound bad, but you'll get used to it. Even down to things like candles and incense. Even down to things like candle. You light a candle and you just picture in your mind like, yeah, this is for my ancestors to light the way so they can get to the next plane. You light some incense. You say, okay, I'm giving this to the spirit of wind. And you just kind of silently, and you get into the habit of doing that. And what you're basically doing is you're spiritizing your entire life. And once you begin to spiritize your life, these entities don't really have a space to feed. And they don't have a space to kind of contact you like that and become bothersome. Even if it's somebody else's astral project, because that could have been somebody else too. That could have been someone projecting themselves into your dream. But the more you surround yourself with a more spiritized environment, the harder it is for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. But that's what it felt like. It felt like a friend, smiling, trying to steal something from me,
Right. Yeah, that wasn't nothing but a phantasm, which is different than a hag. When a hag comes, you're usually afraid. they hold you down, they have sex with you, all kind of craziness.
You know, but that was a fantastic. Just trying to get you right. You had a stowaway.
Oh, thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Is there like a succubus and an incubus?
Right, you got it. You got it, brother. Exactly what it is.
Right.
Yeah, man, listen. Sometimes it's all right. Depending on how they approach, sometimes you be like, hey, well, you know what, I'm here.
But it never works out well. You know, I've had clients I've worked with, and they enjoy it. Like they say, yeah, so this energy comes and makes love to me, and you got to be careful with that because they're making children with you. They're not just having sex with you, but they're making children, and those children stay with you. So what happens is that when you have children later and the child comes out and you're like, man, I don't know where this behavior is coming from. It's from that entity that was sitting impregnated inside of you all this time, just waiting to come out physically.
You know, another good movie to check out. Yeah. Another good movie to check out is I, Thomas. Dean Coots. You got a series of books talking about death, and I checked out that Adjustment Bureau. That is a very good, definitely a very good movie for the listeners out there to check out. Real good movie. Right. And you know what's good too now? The Dracula series that's on TV. Real good. Real good. Real good. Let me go back to the phone lines. Thank you, caller. Let's go back to the phone lines real quick. Let me go to 646 area code. 646, New York. Back to New York. What's going on?
All right, can you hear me?
New York. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Peace.
Peace.
Oh, okay, good. You can hear me then.
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great.
What's your question?
All right, I'm glad to hear that. I just want to make a couple of statements, and then I want to ask a question. You said something about the 1 to 20 and the number system. And I was a 5%er at 15, and most of the lessons I forgot. But that number system I've been using for 55 years. So I definitely like you mentioning that. The other thing was that it would have, you also mentioned Thor, and but you didn't really mention the relationship of Odin to Asaru, Hess to Hess, and Thor being Aru. And I think that that is an indication of how the mystery system moved around. Because they're way up there in the north, and even though they have they brought it into their reality as far as their names and whatnot. It is still the same story. The story hasn't changed. So I thought that was a really something that needed to be said. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to Kupahidi Nagumi because you was talking about martial arts, and I think that that should be mentioned also as one of the martial arts of Africa, which is Kupahidi Nagumi. One of the, and I'm trying not to take up too much time, but one of the other things that you mentioned was the gold. And they've been doing experiments on gold now, where they, it's nothing new. I'm not saying it's new, but I'm saying that they have caught up to what has been was in Kemet, as far as the gold powder. And what they're finding is that when they put this gold powder in and I'm talking about scientists now, when they put this gold powder in a bowl, the bowl becomes lighter, and sometimes the gold powder is not there, or it becomes invisible. And they figured, well, it's there, but it's invisible. And then they tried to stir it around so that it would, mess up the consistency. And when it came back, it was still in the same consistency. So it wasn't just invisibility. So when you talk about the Egyptians eating gold powder, there's a lot more to that. Okay, so the question that I wanted to, or the statement that I wanted to say is, you said something about Jimi Hendrix and Machine Gun. I also listened to Jimi Hendrix and Machine Gun, but I got a different impression from it, you know. And the reason I think that I got that impression is because I was at draft age when he made that song, and I saw it as a condemnation of the war that was going on, and because the way he worked his guitar, you could hear the screams, the bombs, and everything. All right, so I felt that was a condemnation of the war, and also the Star-Spangled Banner being a condemnation of America at war. You know, because when I listened to his interview, and I didn't see any ego. You know, I mean, of course he has an ego, but it wasn't like a projected ego. You know, maybe you can check out some of those old interviews. I'm sure there's one on YouTube. And about him burning the guitar, right? Well, fire is associated with the spirit, so you know, I don't see any problem with that either. But anyway, that's just one of the things, you know, something that I wanted to, you know, get out to you. Also, could you possibly repeat the web pages or, you know, connection points slower, because I was trying to clean and I didn't get it. You know, by the time I got to my pen, it was over. Anyway, thank you for letting me speak, and I'll listen off air.
Okay. All right. Well, first, it's important. I'll give the web pages, but on the comments that were made, you have we exist on various realms or various dimensional levels. We're multi-dimensional beings, right? Even we find that within our own social interactions. Some people may know us as father or mother. Other people may know us as uncle or auntie or employee or sister or brother. We have different projections that we have in the world. So the same goes for anything that occurs, even from an artistic perspective. Jimi Hendrix can do a song condemning the war, and that's the political story, or even the artistic story. But then what's the spiritual story? This is very similar to when I was speaking to the brother about the water. We can fall for the trick of the 5-dimensional reality, and that illusion being, or that identity or that reality being the only reality. And then we can look beneath it and say, okay, from a spiritual perspective, what else is being said here? Is it just that? You know, is that all that's being said? Or, you know, because sometimes you got to also look, if we're existing beyond our human character and our human identity, then that means the messages that we're sending, we may be sending it in a way where it's unbeknownst to that human identity and human character. You know, so is that to say that Bob Marley knew that he was Oshun? You know, he knew that he was bringing the understanding of a love vibration and that joining of forces, or Peter Tosh knew that he was Shango. Did they know that spiritually, that they were married? And I'm not speaking about homosexuality. I'm just talking about a joining of forces. Did they know that? Or does Prince, or the artist formerly known as Prince, whatever, does he know that he's Oshun? And did Michael Jackson know that he's Shango? And that's why they always had this somewhat of an artistic mating together and always compared with each other. Are they aware of that? Probably not. They don't know what anything about that. But from a soul perspective and a soul level, it's very clear that is what's being orchestrated. So there's always more than one story to look at, always more than one dimension. In this tradition, we have a corpus of information known as Ifa, spelled I-F-A, Ifa. And Ifa means, the word actually, it means to scratch. And what that means is, when you're dealing with Ifa, or you're dealing with divination or readings at that level, you're scratching beneath the surface of perceived reality. So there's one story, which is that surface story, but then when you start doing a reading and you dig into the spirituality of something, you find out, oh, this is this manifesting as that. Similar to the example I gave earlier, my anger or my hurt is manifesting itself as a dysfunctional liver. So we can look at it and say, oh man, your liver is bad because you drink and you don't drink enough water, and your blood is dirty and you need to do a detox and a colonic. We could say that, or we could say, that's the human part of the story, that's the physical part, but what's happening with you spiritually that's manifesting itself as this? maybe your desire to want to go drink, or your desire to dehydrate yourself, and so forth and so on, and have these parasites in your system. And the parasites could be represented, like the other brother said, well, I got this parasite coming into my dream. You may find that you go get a colonic and you got a bunch of worms in your system, because everything that's spiritual or soulful is going to manifest itself as a clue in our human life. Everything that we experience in here is a clue. That's why everything should be decoded. Don't leave anything encrypted. You decode everything that comes in front of you, even down to people's names. I mean, it's no coincidence that Brother Yusef and I have the same name. Yusef, I'm Yuya, same name. So, I look at that and say, what the heck does that mean? You decode everything, so in that instance, I'll just speak about the human story. Now, as far as my contacts, I can always be reached at saduluhouse.com, which is SADULUHOUSE.com. I can be reached at orishareligion.com, which is ORISHARELIGION.com. Any questions or comments a person wants to send to me, feel free. They could do it at questions@anunation.org. So that's the word questions at ANUNATION.org. Questions at ANUNation. And between those different portals, you'll definitely be able to contact me. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and some other things too. So you can find me on Facebook as well.
Okay, brother. Thank you very much. I very much hope to be in communication with you. Have a great day.
I would love that, brother. You as well.
All right, peace.
Thank you, brother, for calling in. Let me go to PA real quick. 412-1568 Pennsylvania on the air.
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Wonderful, brother.
What's going on?
Oh, I love the show. I love the show. I love to hear something coming from the Nile Valley. 'Cause most of these books, brother, I can't pronounce your name correctly, brother. What's your name again?
Yuya.
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 Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I want to know, would I be considered ignorant due to the fact that most of these books come from the Nile Valley, and I really don't even entertain what's in them? So am I doing myself a disservice by doing that?
By not reading Nile Valley literature? No, I wouldn't say you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, like the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, all them other books that are basically adopted from the books from Kemet.
And you're saying you basically have chosen to skip over Kemet. You don't deal with things from Kemet.
No, he deals with Kemet. He just is he doing himself a disservice by not reading these other books like the Bible, the Quran,
okay, I got you,
and all these other things.
You know what? I would say in a sense, somewhat. Because and I'm not an advocate of the Quran or the Bible. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that we study Nile Valley civilization because it has the biggest body of translated or interpreted literature, over other systems, so and many people they go to Kemet because it's exotic too. So you got the exotic factor and things like that. And of course we have the temple, so we get to see these big representations of things that we can decode. But it doesn't mean that information that has manifested itself throughout the world is any less relevant or valuable. Now, I understand what you're saying, that the Bible and the Quran and the Torah and these different books which have Kemetic names, Quran and Torah, and the Bible being the Helios Biblios, or the Sun books, or the Little Sun books, actually is what it translates into. Certainly it takes you right back to Kemet. Can you just stick with Kemet and get everything you need? Yeah, you certainly can. You can. Would it help you maybe to crack open some of these books? I would say so. Yeah, it helps at times to get a bigger picture of things. And I wouldn't even suggest just to stay with Nile Valley civilization. I mean, certainly, go to the Congo and I'm not saying you haven't been doing it, so I don't make the assumption that you only stick with Kemet. This is for the people listening. You certainly want to tap into the Dogon. The Yoruba, as we know, many Yoruba have said that, the Yoruba civilization was a civilization that migrated out of Kemet. So then one could say, then why study the Yoruba? Why don't we just stick with Kemet then? Because when things migrate and they move and they morph, there's a perspective that's sometimes added onto it because, again, things evolve. So again, if we look at Asia, we have the I Ching system of divination, or some people call it I Ching, and this relates itself directly to the Yoruba form of Ifa, and this was used in Kemet. So should we say, well, don't work with the I Ching or the I Ching or the I Ching? Don't work with it. No, work with it too. Learn it all. My suggestion is you do a disservice when you exclude anything. Read it all. Read the Satanist Bible. Read the stuff that you think is, especially the stuff that you think is foul. That's the stuff you need to look at. The stuff that you even look at as grotesque. You need to look at that, because what that's doing is that's invigorating and activating another part of you. And that's where you get your balance from. So if you look at the Torah or the Quran as just being like a bunch of fluff and kindergarten information, which some may argue it is, and I'm not saying I'm against it or for it in any way, but I would certainly say, yeah, it is a repackaged edition of more potent information. But even in the repackaging, there is some very interesting things that we could pick out of it. If you're studying information out of Kemet and you don't actually speak or know thoroughly Medu Neter, then all you're reading is something that somebody repackaged through translation anyway, whether it was Wallace Budge or whoever. You're still reading a reinterpretation. So just as the Bible or the Quran is a reinterpretation, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but unless you're speaking those original languages and you have that original context, either way you're getting something that has been watered down. When you study Kemet or you study the Yoruba systems, you're not getting the fullness of those systems. You're still getting something that has been watered down and diluted, no matter how you want to look at it, because they've all been invaded and fragmented. Every last system. The closest you're going to get to something that is probably a little bit more untouched is the Congolese systems, and it's darn near impossible to get any one of them to talk to you.
Okay, well, the question I guess I want to ask, when I say Kemet, as most people can identify what I mean, like the African continent, period. I mean the whole continent, because most people identify, Kemet as being the zenith of Africa, and that's basically, what we know at this point. But as far as like going back in the interior of Africa, because most of the time, if you read the Nile Valley people in Kemet or the Egyptians, whatever you want to call them, they said they came, from the interior of Africa. So a lot of this history, I'm very, very interested in, and that's what I choose to follow. When I was reading some information about John Hendrick Clark, and he's basically saying this, when a person is trying to say that the copy version is divine, and the original version is paganism, I mean, that's crazy. So maybe that might be one of the reasons why, I don't entertain certain things, because, everything in these books, come up out of Africa. So I think that really keeping us as black people separated, because I think we're dealing more so with the fake watered down version as opposed to going to the original version. I mean, a lot of...
Yeah, but we don't have the original version. Even when you go back to Kemet or you go to, we'll say Pan-African. That's what you were saying, that you're kind of saying you deal with Pan-African mystery systems or spiritual systems. You're not just regulating yourself to the north. But none of that is original. I mean, we can date a lot of that text back to 10, 20, 30,000 years, but we've been here much longer than that. So no matter what no matter anything that you read, or anything that you see a sign of or an image of, is us at our decline. So even if you study Kemet, or you study the Congolese, or you study the Sangoma, or you study Yoruba, all you're doing is studying Africans when they were coming down. So you still are not getting the original text, no matter what you do. The original text is engraved in your soul. That's where the original text. That's when you start hearing people talk about the Akashic records. Well, Akasha is nothing but ether. That's that dark black matter. And the only way you're going to get some original information is to tap into that. Anything that comes after that is going to be corrupted by man's perspective. So even if it's an African man or an African woman, it's still corrupted by that perspective, which, in all honesty, just because it was on a continent, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but just because it was on a continent doesn't mean that that perspective was not corrupted and perverted. Because we have to look at, there was a downfall. There were problems. So obviously the way we were looking at some things wasn't working for us in some senses. So the best way that you can tap into it is you read the information, but then you got to look at the underlying energy, the underlying subcontext of what's being said. It's just like if you go to Kemet and you look at the imprints that are in the stone reliefs, some people will see one thing. But if you if you're tapped into that soul energy or that Akashic energy, you'll see more of the picture of what was trying to be expressed. When you look at the Nebhu, or what many call the Sphinx, and you see, okay, it has the head of a man and the body of a lion, or some people say the body of a panther, and many folk have said, well, this was created in this form because at that time we were at the age of Leo. Again, well, now we're just going back to that same prison of Zodiac. But this is something we look at and we herald as being so great and so wonderful, but it still represents the trap of man. Because even when you understand the Nebhu just means, or the Nebharu means the overcoming of your bestial or animal nature with your God nature. So it still speaks about the challenge and the struggle that the ancient Kemites
had at that time. So anything that you're going to touch that you can actually see with the physical eye is something that was already created while we were corrupted. So, I wouldn't say you're doing stuff a total disservice, but I think, you can get a wider picture. But if it just doesn't speak to your soul, like if you're just like, well, I don't feel like it, I just don't, then don't do it. The priority as melanated beings is that we understand our origins. That's a priority. Anything after that is just extra gravy. So if you decide to go read the Quran, or decide to read the Helios, Biblios, or whatever else, that's just extra gravy on the top, but it does help to flesh out the picture a little better.
Yeah, okay. I understand what you're saying. And but the only thing I would say is, like, most of these, like I said, from what I've been looking at, are only like 1,000 years old, and I'd rather get closer to where these individuals, there were prophets, where they got their information from. So, and I think, Go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna go ahead and finish your point. Go ahead and finish your point.
Now, go ahead and say what you were going to say, because I lost the train of thought when you were speaking. What were you going to say?
What I was going to say was, the reason that I study different religious schools of thought is I appreciate the beauty of how different cultures around the world express the truth of what we gave to the world. When you read Buddha, you can see, well, they're all saying the same thing. They may be using, because they have a different framework that they're working from, a different type of culture, and so forth. The principles are expressed in a beautiful way, and I think that's why I like personally to read the Bible, the Quran, Zen, a lot of ancient systems and everything, is because I can see how everything is the same, and how foolish it is for people to have religious wars. It's really it just epitomizes that they really do not understand the truth. They could not be God's people. They just can't see, because they don't see. They're blind. And that's why I do it,
But you understand that there's a source where most of the stuff comes from. And my thing is, like, this is like one of the reasons was tearing, us apart. And I think one of the other reasons was tearing us apart, that we're unbalanced. Correct me if I'm wrong, brother, but I think some of the first guardian angels, they were women, they were black women, from my understanding, from what I've been reading and studying. And I think we're so unbalanced because it seems like the black man really doesn't love the black woman. Because most brothers that I know, they won't marry nobody who looks like their mother. You know, they want somebody who's closer to looking like a European or something else. You know, and like, I don't know, I just think like we don't look out for our kids, and you know, we don't even identify with Africa. Even if you go with the Pangea effect, where they're saying all the planets, all the continents were together, Africa's still in the middle. We hate Africa. Still Africa, we hate it. Africa is the mother of the world, and we hate our mothers because we won't marry nobody like her, and you know, we won't associate with Africa. Anything to do with Africa, we as black people, we don't like. But everybody who's rich get their hands in Africa, taking all the resources out of it, the information out of it. But we hate our mother. Africa's our mother. We don't marry nobody look like our mother. We don't. And I'll leave it at that. And I'll just listen in at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that may be up to argument a little bit for some folk, and you know, I think there's a lot of us out of here. There's a lot of us out here who I speak to, you know, clients I can counsel, and they're looking for African women. You know, when we say a lot of times, oh man, we're not marrying our sisters, well, just like we have a deficit of solid and grounded and right-minded men in the community, we certainly have a deficit of solid, grounded, and right-minded women. Unfortunately, in this society, in American society, there's more incentive for a woman to exist a certain level of cultural insanity and spiritual crazy. She has a lot of incentive, and she even has a system that will support that. She has a system that will support the removal of her man from the home. She has a system that will support her staying in a place of perpetual childhood. She never really graduates to being a woman. So I think for a lot of men, and you know, again, it's open to debate. A lot of men, they come into a place where they want to start learning and they want to start growing, and finding a woman who can properly mate and complement that movement and that exertion is extremely difficult. And unfortunately, you'll have a lot of people who are not of the same ethnic group who are not afraid of an ankh, or who are not afraid when you say, well, hey, I want to put an ancestral altar in the house. They're not going crazy and pleading the blood of Jesus on you. You know, so that causes them sometimes to say, well, you know what, I'd rather take the path of least resistance because this just isn't working. You know, working with you, I'm never going to get anywhere. And that may not necessarily be true, but I certainly wouldn't advocate or co-sign that the men are dropping out of connection or association with the women who resemble their mother, because the truth is, your mother might have been crazy, first of all, because this collective crazy is intergenerational. It's been going on for a while now, and not a whole lot of women mirror that. Like you say, well, some of the original guardian angels were black women. Are we really seeing that in society? Like, are we really seeing women who are mirroring the virtues and the aspects of Ma'at? Are we seeing the Nzingas and the Asante-Waz? At some point, we have to acknowledge and address the fact that our women are not coming out the same anymore. They're not coming out like they once were. Now, that I certainly do blame on the man, because I consider the man to be the vanguard of the community. And if you allow vipers and snakes to get into the community and get into your woman's ear, she is certainly going to go crazy. Why? Because her nature is water. She's a sponge. So if you live in an insane society, your woman is going to have more of that insanity than the man is, because the man is an electrical energy. He shoots out. He's more egoic. So he's more about, no, I'm doing this. I got this. He doesn't listen that well. Whereas the woman, being a sponge and being a watery energy, anything you deposit into it, she's going to hold. So therefore, within this society, the first point of attack that they go after is the woman. Because if we can get the woman to take root of this, she won't let it go. She'll leave the imprint of this programming inside of her for a very long time, and she's going to pass it on to her children. So, I mean, I think we as men, we need to start, instead of just saying, well, you know, we don't want our women or we don't want anything. I agree with you that, yeah, things that are associated with Africa, our people have turned their nose up at for a myriad of reasons, different kind of people, you know, but I think as men, we're the solution finders. We're the ones that have to create the solution. And the solution is not just finding any old black female and mating with them, because you could be, you know, sleeping with the enemy. And many of us have that story of sleeping with the enemy, thinking that we were doing something honorable by joining with our own kind, and yet still you join with an agent. And that's some of the things that we need to start flushing out. And it goes beyond a look. It goes beyond, well, this sister got locks and she smells like oils and she said hotep when she greeted me. We got to move beyond that silliness, because for many people that is the embracing of Mother Africa. But there's very rarely an embracing of African thought and African calculation. Let's move beyond the name. Let's move even beyond the name Africa, because Afrique without coal. I mean, that we call it Africa, and we're talking about nations within a continent. Are we identifying with a specific nation? There was tribalism and wars that already existed there. So let's try to tap back into the mentality and calculation of those great elders, of those fallen elders before they fell, as opposed to just the identity of group of saying, well, I'm a proud African. We got to do a little bit better at this point. You know, that's good to help build self-esteem, but then after your self-esteem is built, then what? What do we do next? You know, and I say that it lies on the shoulders of the men. I don't even think it lies on the shoulders of the women. Our job is to be the vanguard. Our job is to instruct and to guide and to give light, just like electricity or sun or positive energy does. And our job is to find women who will receive that light, just like the earth does, and take that seed and produce with it. Not take it and act like dry sand or hard rock and take our seeds and let them fall by the wayside. And I think many people have experienced that and have decided to move to something else because they're not seeing anything produced. And that can be very disheartening for a man, in my opinion.
Wow. Wow. All right. Let me go to the next caller. Appreciate it, Pennsylvania. Let me go to 910-6389. You're on High Frequency Radio. North Carolina. Okay, let me go to Georgia real quick. 278-3523, Georgia. You're on High Frequency Radio. Greetings.
I got it. You know, I guess I'm listening to the show, and I guess my question is, in your opinion, where do we need to start at as the people? Because it seems like everybody is just everywhere. You know, you got people trying to find relationships based off the Zodiac. You got people trying to decide on which way they want to go in reference to their true history, be it by religion, be it by Nile Valley civilization. You got male on males, female on females. You know, it seems like we are everywhere out here, and there's no point of reference, no start point of reference that we can start by. So, in your opinion, I just want to ask, you know, where does the beginning point or point that we can start off with?
Okay, and I love when that question is asked because, and I'll just say as a precursor, a lot of times we get into all this high level information and it becomes dead information because it's like, well, what do we do with it if we have no applicable space and environment to execute any of these principles? So I want to just thank you for the question before I answer it. I'm glad someone asked it. First, I will say we need to come to a basic understanding of the terms and the principles that we feel we need to create community. You know, like for instance, you said we. Well, we have to first determine who the we is. And everyone who's of the same skin doesn't necessarily, or shouldn't, in my opinion, constitute themselves as being the we. We have to start to do away with these all-inclusive agendas, where everybody come on because there's strength in numbers. Not necessarily. There's strength in a focused and directed nucleus. That's where the strength is. Things are always done with a very small nucleus. So the we may be you and 4 other people. That's fine. That's all you need. You don't need 100 or 500. You don't need mass movement because that's going to be dismantled anyway. So you can forget that, a mass movement. That's too easy to infiltrate. So first you need to determine who the we is. And you come to a basic understanding of your own basic terms. For instance, you take something like the word black. What do we call ourselves? What are we? Are we black? You know, are we African? Are we this, that? And let's all come into a unified understanding of what that term means and how it activates itself as an adverb. And that by itself may take you a month. You know, just coming to the terms of what is God and what constitutes, because if we're talking about, you know, and it sounds like what you're really talking about is us kind of coming back to our right minds. That happens within the context of community. Community only happens through the stimulus of family. Family only happens through the stimulus of a single right mind. Okay, so one of the first things we need to do is to start seeing the things that are acting as a hindrance for us creating family. Right? Until there's family, there can be no clan. And then after this clan, there's village. And after this village, then there's nation. But it all has to start with that. So one of the things that we need to define is, well, what constitutes a family? And let's say, for instance, and this is going back to the defining of a we. One person says, well, hey, just because we love each other, we're the same sex, so we're a family. You may say, well, nah, I see family as the balance between masculine and feminine energies, and families have the potentiality to create. And if you're not creating anything, technically you don't have a family, you just have two people who are masturbating each other. Let's say if that is your perspective, right? If that is your perspective, then you now know that group can't be a part of the we that you keep referring to. You see? So as soon as you start to redefine what the we is, it makes it much easier to determine who is ready to rear the type of community that you envision in your mind. And it has nothing to do with zodiacs and you know, all the different things that we're talking about. It has to do with the basic primal foundations of what we use in order to get along and get together with people. How do we shake hands? Do we shake hands at all? You know, it's the customs and the mores that allow us, in the rituals that allow us to establish community. Now, many will say it's your diet, we got to eat a certain way. That's certainly true, but that's more true in the sense that allows us to be a lot more efficient in our community, you know, rearing. It allows us to now have the strength to farm, to have the clarity of thought, to be able to discuss ideas and things. So that helps in that sense. But before, and what's more important than all of that, we have to come to a unified agreement of the terms. We have to write up a mission statement. Okay, let's say if it's you, brother, and it's two other people, two other families, let's say. And you say, okay, you know what, let's write up a mission statement as to what we're here to do. You know, and for some people, they may say, well, we have to understand law. Okay, well, that's what your community is about. Me, personally, I feel like it's land. We need land. Without land, you can't do much. But with land, you can do anything. You can make anything happen. If you got, even if it's just an acre, and you just putting a sleeping bag on it, you can do a lot when you got some land. And then now the law people may come in and say, yeah, but that land could be snatched because of eminent domain if you don't know how to secure your land. Okay, well, then let's have some communication between the communities. But just because I don't feel like my priority and my primary essential should be law, doesn't mean that we can't interoperate if we can come to a common agreement on what the mission statement is, on what the plan is. You know, like how the so-called Jews have never again. And if you look at everything they do, it aligns themselves with never will we go through this again. So if you can find 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 people who can come to that same, you know, you take maybe 3 tenets. Family. How do we form family? This is what family looks like. Okay, how do we gather resources? Well, what are resources defined as? How do we eat? You know, and I would really say take food, clothing, and shelter. You find a couple people who have the same understanding of food, clothing, and shelter, how they're maintained and how they're defined. Now you got a community, you can start doing some stuff. Get some land. That's very easy to do. Get a junk plot of land. You don't need electricity going to it. You can drill your own well. You can pull up solar panels. And even if you just build a bunch of sheds, now you're talking. Now you got something that's physically tangible. And you got to always remember, brother, that our people are a people of show and prove. You can talk all day and I'll shave you to death, you know, and hit the rattles and the drums and all of that. But at the end of the day, if they don't see something tangibly, they're not getting with you. It's just not going to happen. So even if you yourself as an individual bought yourself a half an acre of land or an acre of land and put up a flag on it and a tent, that would attract more people to your mission than you eloquently getting on a podium and expressing why we need to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. Our people are tired of rhetoric. So my advice in that sense is, brother, just we got to come to some very simple terms. And you could pick food, clothing, and shelter. But I think family is important. How do we define a functional family? How do we define a functional individual? And once you come to that place, then you can start defining who that we is. Because when you say we, brother, I guarantee you, between everyone who's listening, if you were to establish a community tomorrow, you probably wouldn't want everyone who's listening there. There's some people who are probably living cultures and lifestyles that you would look as a direct detriment to what it is that you're trying to build. So I think as black people, I'm just going to use the term black to be inclusive for everyone listening, we got to stop saying we so much. And I'm not picking apart your statement, but I'm just saying, it's just something that I feel we got to start redefining what that we is. Because certain types of melanated people, I have no desire to live around anymore. I don't want to be around them anymore. They cause too much problems and they attract too much heat when I'm really trying to do something productive. So my we has changed greatly.
I agree. Good answer.
Yeah.
Appreciate that, Yusef, man. You're doing a fantastic job. Great host. Keep up the good work, brother.
Hey, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for calling, man. I appreciate all the love. All right, let me go. We got about 12 more minutes. I'm going to see about 10 more minutes. We got to take 1 or 2 more calls, y'all, then we'll end it. Let me go CC real quick. 202-7781.
Peace. What's going on, y'all?
Peace.
All right, man. Appreciate the call. I'm over here. My name's David Michael, by the way. I'm calling over here on Florida. I really appreciate the last caller for asking that question and even bringing up the topic. I had a question of this. I was looking at some small islands outside of Honduras, and I basically wanted to, I've been slowly asking people if they're interested, but I wanted to kind of do the same thing. Just because, one, I got some ancestry over there, and two, I just like the area. I wanted to turn it kind of into like use any locals there and use it as a place for, servers, just metal buildings full of servers. Beyond that, just using some type of wild implant, fruit or anything, and just mass produce as much as possible. And I was interested in you guys' words on how you would approach the local government there, or whomever you would need to speak with to see if you could come to that type of agreement. I don't know if that rules in as like ambassadorship or like just there on business, but I'm just asking what maybe off the top of y'all's head, what's something you would what comes to mind if you were going to approach someone like that, just so I can hear what y'all have to say. Might hit me or something. And besides that, I just Yusef, and your name, bro, you what?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the words, bro. It's real good, man. There ain't nothing else to say besides that. It's just good. You obviously get it and got it nice, man. I can't even say nothing. Ain't nothing to say. But I'd appreciate your guys' dialogue about that question. Or I don't even know if it's Honduras. It might just be some land out in the Midwest or something. But I've been so interested in this for the last 6 months. And I just want y'all talk so good. I'd like to hear what y'all just got to say on that topic.
Well, I would say definitely, and I just want to kind of put this out there, first, the best plan is a quiet plan. So in knowing that a best plan is a quiet plan, keep some things to yourself. You know, one of the things that's important to understand, like the brother was calling and he asked about, man, am I doing myself a disservice by only studying Nile Valley civilization? The thing about that is the reason why there's so much information that's put out on Nile Valley civilization and is so accessible to melanated people is because the people who have robbed those tombs for so many years, they've ran out of interpretations. They can't understand some of the new things that they find. So what they do is they put it out into the melanated community, and then we do lectures and everything on it. We do YouTube videos, and then they use those videos to understand the hieroglyphs. So they're watching us, and they're using us to interpret the things that they're finding, because our ancestors left them for us. They didn't leave them for them to understand. They left them for us to understand. So only we really get it. So I say that long thing to say, you know, as you're planning on creating, which sounds like some form of sustainability, you know, in terms of this, the best plan is a quiet plan, because you are being listened to and watched. You are that important. Now, I actually have personal experience as it relates to building overseas, and I can tell you the first thing that you always want to do, come addressing a need. Don't come saying, hey, I want to put up a manufacturing plant, or I want to provide some type of service resort or whatever. Don't do that. Skip that. Come first, you know, meeting the locals, meeting the local officials, and find out whatever region it is, Honduras or whatever, find out what that local region has a need for. Okay, they may have children who don't have enough money to go to school. They may need an orphanage built. You know, they may need the infrastructure. They may need some roads cut to certain places, things like that. Or they may need a teacher. Maybe you have a skill or a trade that a particular area needs, or they need people to be trained in that area. The best thing you can do, and I'm just telling you what's been extremely effective for me, is you come and you say, well, hey, you know, we'll find out what's going on. You know, you're going to have to spend some time. And once you find out, say, hey, look, I'm willing to do this, and you don't necessarily, I mean, they know why you're there. This is how business is done. And you say, well, look, you know, I see this is going on here. You know, the children have a high dropout rate. You need this type of program in place, or whatever, or education and service. I'm willing to provide that. You know, and you present yourself as that first. And then what you're doing is you're showing that you're not just coming to take out of the area, but you're actually trying to become a member of that environment, or a member of that area, or I don't want to use the term citizen, but, you know, an active participating resident in that locality. And once you do that, you'll be surprised. They'll give you land. You know, say, here, well, here's a patch. We got a nice fire. You know, you can develop on it. It's not hilly or anything like that. And we'll give you this as long as you sign a contract and promise to continue to do this, or provide this service. Or, you know, we have a certain amount of orphan children in this area, as long as you promise to build a cottage, you know, for the orphans, and maintain the operating budget, or contribute to the operating budget yearly, such and such and like that. You'll find that you'll get your best success that way, you know, and you'll not be seen as someone coming in to just, you know, be a parasite and drain that area of its resources and its talent, but you're actually showing respect to the local culture and politics. And I'm not speaking about the governmental politics, but even just the communal politics of wherever it is that you want to build at. So that would be my advice.
All right. Okay, DC, want to thank you for calling in. Appreciate it, brother.
Oh yeah, thank you. That was right on. Total agree. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Because that's essentially what I want to go down. I see so many spots, likes from Brazil, and like, man, there's so much stuff that's just naturally there, and no one's really it's not being of use. And so I figured on top of that, like, you know. But yeah, thank you for thank you for them words. And you're welcome. I do need to be quiet. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you, brother. Okay, y'all. That's it. I mean, I know it's a lot more people. I mean, we probably could go another hour answering questions, man. That's how many people is in line and everything. But we've reached the end of the show. Hey, brother, I want to thank you. You did your thing.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Again. Give out your information again so they get in touch with you, because I'm sure there's a lot of people going to have questions for you, brother.
Okay, cool. If anyone has a question, they can contact me at questions, the word questions, at anunation.org. That's ANUNATION.org. And like I said, my team will make sure they get it to me. If you want to check out my classes, you can go to saduluhouse.com, SADULUHOUSE.com. If you want information on the Orisha, which we were speaking about, you can go to orishareligion.com. That's ORISHARELIGION.com, Orisha Religion. And those are probably the best places to get a hold of me. And, you know, if there's and I want to also thank the listeners, because some of your listeners did actually reach out to me after the last show, and we've been in contact, and I think a couple of them even joined my class. You know, so, you know, I open that as well. And, you know, anybody who has any questions, just feel free to send them through those channels.